Go. Announcement regarding public notice of meeting. Notice of the time and place of these committee meetings for the August OPPD meetings was publicized by notifying the area news media and by updating OPPD's website and by mailing such notice to each of the district's directors on August 8th, 2018. Before we get rolling, Tim, could you give us our safety briefing?
Sure. We're on the conference center level 9 west of Energy Plaza. In the event of severe weather, I know we're supposed to get some weather today. I don't know if it'll be severe or not. We would actually migrate down to the main level of the building. We could take the elevators down to do that, and then we would go to the call center area and be directed by security to do that. If you have a medical condition, please write it down or tell your neighbor. The AED and the first aid kit are to the elevators and to the right-hand side, one on top of each other. Is anybody here certified in the use of an AED or in CPR? So obviously we have quite a few people. That's good to know. In the event of a fire, please do not use the elevator. We would exit the building by going down the steps from this floor all the way down to the main level and then out on the 17th Street side of the building, and then be directed to our area where we would get together as a group. Are there any questions to the safety briefing at all? Anybody want to call 911 in the event we need to? Mart's the official 911 caller, and she does have her phone. So very good, thank you. All right, thanks.
Thanks, Tim. First committee report will be governance. Tim, you okay?
All right, the governance committee met prior to this meeting this morning and covered quite a few things, as you see on our agenda. Mart wanted to get everything done in one meeting. So. But anyway, as you can see, we got a lengthy agenda. A lot of this is just our cleanup things, but they still are important things we had to take care of. Most of these will be on our regular agenda, on the consent agenda for the meeting on Thursday as well. So I'll turn it over to Mart Setke, and she can kind of walk us through these.
Okay. So our first item is a report on a severance agreement. We did have one individual in the financial services business unit who opted to leave the company following the accountable management system reorganization in that group, and she did receive a severance payment. It exceeds $50,000 and therefore may be subject to the requirement for reporting settlements under Section 84713 of the Nebraska Revised Statutes. So we are reporting that item. The next item on our agenda, we use Quantum Workplace to administer our Best Places to Work for You survey. And we have Megan Mislanka here from that organization to give you a high-level overview. We administered the survey June 15th through the end of June. And so we are beginning to roll out the results to the organization. She's going to give you a brief presentation. I also want to introduce Amy Nachman, who is our Director of Organizational Development, and Angela Galloway, who is Senior Organizational Development Consultant. They have also worked on the survey this year. So, Megan, I'm going to take over.
Yes. Perfect. Thank you. So we're going to start today by kind of covering some of the year-over-year analysis, really establishing a foundation of the results overall, and then I'll finish with a few recommendations from Quantum Workplace. So first, before we dive into the exact 2018 results, we're going to look through some of the 2017 results. We had three main focus areas in 2017. You can kind of see them up on the screen specifically. First, we wanted to emphasize our leader accountability with engagement, really making sure that we are following up on the survey results and that we knew as an organization, managers and leaders play a key role in driving engagement. Second, we wanted to commit to regularly listening to feedback. So we hosted a whole bunch of focus groups and different ways to gather feedback throughout the organization. And third, we wanted to focus on kind of three principles around clarity, connection, and care as our foundation. For our 2018 survey, you can see the response rate of 78% is up from 2017. Last year in 2017, we did encounter a storm during the survey, so it did impact participation, but we're really back up to a strong participation rate. We've got 4 engagement outcome items, and you can see some of the summary. The more important data point is we have 850 employee comments. So with strong participation and a strong comment rate, that essentially means employees are willing to partake in the conversation and give us feedback as an organization. At the bottom, you're going to see 3 metrics that summarize our key scores. First, our engagement index is 71.7%. That's a strong engagement score. It represents a healthy organization. Our overall favorability is just that level of favorability across all items. But more importantly, the score we often focus on is that overall score on a 100-point scale. And we are at 77.35 this year. We are really striving for that threshold of 80 for that best places to work for you culture. So we've improved, obviously, since last year quite a bit. We've got a little ways to go. When an individual in the organization finishes the survey, they get placed into a spectrum of engagement. And they're placed in these 4 buckets called highly engaged, moderately engaged, barely engaged, and disengaged. And the percentages you see in 2018 is the percent of the population that fell within each of those buckets along that spectrum. So 35% of our population fell within that 5.0 to 6.0. Essentially, that means they were really favorable across a lot of the survey items. Doesn't mean they didn't give us any constructive feedback, but on average, they fell really favorable. They agreed and strongly agreed. 47% fell within that light blue. You can see the comparison to 2017, 2016, and 2014. So the good news is we are up from 2017. We are stronger in that percent population that is highly engaged. And then even compared to 2 types of external benchmarks, we have the Best Places to Work program that runs in 45 different markets here in the US. And from that Best Places to Work contest, we're comparing OPPD's results to utilities, national same size, and then regional same size. Think about that as your aspirational comparison point. If you're really striving to be that best places to work for you culture, that's a really good benchmark to compare to. We've got some work to do, but we are headed in the right direction. On the flip side, we have customers that work with us directly on their engagement initiatives and their culture initiatives. That's more of your normative benchmark. We have a lot of different utility organizations, similar sized organizations, and then we've even created that top quartile of similar sized organizations. In comparison to the utility organizations, we're actually a little bit stronger, so that's good. That's a good comparison to our normative set. However, our aspirations are more geared towards that best places to work for you, so we've got some work to do. When we specifically look at the concept of engagement, we are actually looking at an employee's mental and emotional connection to OPPD, to their work and to their team. So it's more than just, are they satisfied working here, but are they an advocate? Do they believe in the organization's future? Do they intend to stay with the organization? When we isolate those 4 engagement outcomes, you're going to see them here on the left. So it would take a lot to get me to leave OPPD. That's a retention item. I'm always thinking about ways to do my work better. That is a discretionary effort item. Are they willing to go that extra mile? I recommend OPPD as a great place to work. That is advocacy. And then my immediate coworkers consistently go the extra mile to achieve great results. That's discretionary effort. The great news is that we are up, and we are up pretty significantly from 2017. For an organization of your size, we would say that 3% is significant movement. Everything under 3% is directionally telling us which way we're headed, but we also know that things can change slightly in a year over year. So seeing an item up 8% or 7.4%, that's really a strong message. And so overall, we've got a positive result from the survey, but we also want to pay attention that some of our absolute scores are still pretty low, which talks about where we were last year. We had lower results last year, so we're seeing the right improvement, but we've got some work to do yet. When you think about improving engagement, Quantum Workplace really focuses on drivers. You don't want to focus on just your lowest scoring items. You want to focus on the items that actually impact someone's engagement here. So we run a statistical analysis to understand what items or what questions, what matters most to your employees here. These are the top 10 drivers of engagement, and we have them kind of themed to the left: your career growth, feeling valued, survey follow-up, and then future outlook. So those are the themes that we see in the driver set. You can see the specific 10 items here in the middle, and then the percent favorable scores, followed by the percent improvement from 2017. So one thing I want to remind us right now, that favorability is the percent of responses that have agreed and strongly agreed. So on that 6-point scale, they have rated the item a 5 or a 6. That's goal state. We ask the questions in such a way that we want individuals to agree or strongly agree. So we're really looking at that goal state. So in some of the items, I know how I fit into OPPD's future plans, that bottom item. We're at 42.4%. Only 42% of our population agrees and strongly agrees with that item. We are up almost 7.2 percentage points from last year, so we're seeing really good improvement. But I share that as a reminder that we've got some work to do on our drivers. So peeling or going further from just engagement, we want to kind of look at the entire survey in general and think about where are our strengths as an organization and where do we have more opportunity. This is just the categories that all of the different survey items roll up into. So you can see safety, manager effectiveness, and teamwork are our top 3 strengths, right? Those are the areas that we are excelling in as an organization. Manager effectiveness and teamwork, to see those two paired together, it really means that personal relationships and the support system around employees is strong. On the flip side, we have decision-making, integrity, and excellence that fall towards the bottom. Overall, though, all categories have seen improvement. So we're seeing that, that improvement up from last year, which is a really good message. We would tell you that that 70% is a threshold across all industries and all different companies we work with that indicate a strong culture. So you've got some categories that are now peaking above that 70%, but we've got a couple categories down there that we still have to focus on. To go even deeper in the category results, we want to look at our most favorable items and then our least favorable items here. You can see some of the categories. Obviously, the safety questions that showed up within the top, our manager effectiveness title, our questions. We also have a pay and benefits question. The benefits offered here meet my and my family's needs. We're at 79% favorable. Benefits and pay rarely show in our most favorable categories in organizations. It's oftentimes a natural constructive point for employees. So it's good that we see that in the top, but we'll also kind of talk about that dynamic in a bit further into the slides. However, our least favorable items, I have starred the items that are those engagement drivers, so those most important items. Now, these are the 10 least favorable survey items for OPPD. And you'll notice here that 7 of those 10 are our drivers. So when we think about we've got some work to do, our most important items are still in the least favorable items. Now, you're always going to have a bottom 10 set of items. That's natural when you stack rank things. The concept here, though, is that our least favorable item is at 40% favorable. So 4 out of 10 people on average are agreeing or strongly agreeing. There's a lot of uncertainty across these items, but there are some strongly disagrees and disagrees as well. When we look at the exact trending from last year, so where did we see the biggest movement and where did we see a few declines? There were only 2 items that saw a decline since 2017. You'll notice one of those 2 items is 0.3% difference from last year. And so that is a direction. We need to pay attention to that item. We need to understand that item when we go deeper into the organization. But at the aggregate, it's not a significant movement. But perspectives like mine are included in the decision making at OPPD. We're at 49.4%. We're down 6.6 percentage points from last year. That is the only item we've seen a meaningful decline on that we should pay attention to. On the flip side, though, I do want to call out there's a few items that we've seen really impressive improvement. So there is open and honest communication between my coworkers and immediate supervisors. So that one-on-one communication, is it a two-way communication path? We're up 32.2%. And then the second one, there is effective communication between departments I work with on a regular basis. We're up 24.4%. So that communication path, we're seeing the perceptions of that really increase in a year-over-year setting. Some of the items that we did see some improvement on, and they're a driver. I've noticed a positive change as a result of the last survey. We're up 11.5 percentage points. However, the overall, or the absolute score, is still at 39%. So we still have a lot of work to do. And the other item I want to call out specifically is I see professional advancement and career development opportunities for myself here at OPPD. We're up 10.4%, but the absolute score is still low in the low 40s. When we look at different populations, now the reason we look at populations and demographics in organization is really to think about, are we creating a consistent experience across different teams and across different locations? What we're looking at to start, I don't know where my header went there, but where we're looking at to start is the overall favorability by each location. So, and this is the largest locations, greater than 100 employees. You see the Energy Plaza on the far left. That's where a majority of our people or responses have sat, and we're up 5.1 percentage points in a year-over-year setting. The other one I want to call out is the Fort Calhoun station is up 11.3%. There has been a significant change in population there, but we are still up 11.3%, which is really good to pay attention to. So our largest location seeing impressive improvement. When, though, we look at those locations that are greater than 100 employees by our drivers, I have everything highlighted in red that is below 60%. So usually we highlight things that are below 70%, but for this, I wanted to call out where we have pretty big opportunities. So although we're up in a year-over-year setting across different locations, we've got some opportunity when it comes to those top 10 drivers of engagement by our largest locations. We also want to take a look at our smaller locations, so those locations that have responses under 100 employees. Now, one of the things to pay attention to here is that the smaller the group, the bigger the swing it may feel. So if you have a population of 10 and one person moves from a 5 to a 4 on average, that could make the results really seem like a bigger shift. So one thing to note is that some of these locations are smaller, so the year-over-year change, although it looks pretty significant, it could be 1 or 2 people that have changed feedback. Now, that's still important, and especially for those location leaders or leaders of those locations, it's still important to pay attention to. One of the other common views that we tend to look at is tenure in organizations. This is natural to see this reverse bell curve. One of the things to note here is we have a really experienced population. We have a higher percentage of our employees that are more tenured. That's uncommon for most organizations. You do see a little bit of a leveling off that happens. Typically, when individuals stay with the organization longer, they peak back up in favorability. They're bought into the strategy of the organization. They really understand kind of how work gets done. They like the role they're in. We kind of plateau off, and it's a couple different things. We have larger populations there that have experienced more change. So the more tenured an organization is, it's also more difficult for some new changes that can occur. Not more difficult, but sometimes people have a prior view that they still have fresh in their minds from a few years ago. And the other thing to note is that usually the 3 to 5 year tenure mark is the least favorable dip in the organization. It's where we kind of see the bottom of that reverse bell curve. We're seeing that more so in the 6 to 9 and then even the 10 to 14 year mark. So that reverse bell curve is coming a little bit later into our organization. When we look at it by driver, you'll also notice that kind of general theme, that 6 to 9 and 10 to 14 has a ton of opportunity. So do the other areas on those key items. But those two areas specifically have a lot of opportunity across all of the top 10 drivers of engagement. We've got a few other population breakouts here just to kind of share and inform the group. This view helps us understand our union population. The three on the right, the 1483, 763, and 31 are our union populations. It is common in organizations to see union populations slightly lower than non-union populations, but these percentages, even from the prior year, have increased, which is a good point of view that all groups have increased. When we take a look at age, again, this is just another demographic to pay attention to. We're seeing kind of it level out for those organizations or for the groups that are 26 and above. So that the cultural difference between individuals who are fall within the age group of 26 to 35 to 66 and over, it's a pretty small difference of 4 percentage points. So that means we're creating, it's not as much about someone's age here, it's more about tenure and experience in the organization. We do also have gender and ethnicity here in the two breakouts. One thing to note is that your female and your male populations are very different in sizes. So your female population, the response population is 332. Your male response population is over 1,000. So it is, although we're seeing the 3 percentage points different, both groups have increased since last year. You do have very different sizes, so just pay attention to that as well, that with 1,000 people that are, it's kind of taking the bulk of the responses, so to speak. Our ethnicity is over on the right, and you can see the N sizes as well. You can see the declines from 2017, or I'm sorry, this actually got flipped. The percent favorable is the blue bar on the right, so the bars just got reversed. But the blue bar here is the 2018 score. The gray bar on the right is your 2017 score. So we have seen that improvement, and you can see the differences across the populations. So last thing I want to share is just the recommendations for next steps. We've got 2 recommendations, really because in an organization, you want to kind of hyper-focus on a few things as an organization, and then allow each local level leader to really drive what they need to for their area of improvement. The one kind of concept overall that we could focus on is continue to build on recognition. There's a lot of different rewards and recognition programs, but do we have that built into a deeper level? It's a driver of an engagement and an item that we see pretty consistent opportunity across locations, across tenure groups. And so this is a quicker win because a lot of times appreciation doesn't take a large investment, and it should be an easier concept for teams to kind of rally behind. So that's kind of recommendation number 1. Recommendation number 2 is to focus on accountability. When reading those 850 employee comments, there is some opportunity that employees perceive OPPD isn't as accountable as it could be. And the 2 general themes that really show up there is around dealing with poor performers. There's a lot of feedback around as the organization grows, is the accountability and expectations for all employees similar? And then next, senior management valuing of people. And this really taps into that follow-up. We have a really strong message that we want to make this the best places to work for every individual, but they're not seeing it at all levels. And so they want to see more accountability to that theme. So those are the 2 recommendations. That's, I think, the only things we're going to chat about today.
Yeah, I would just say real quick here from a management perspective, and Mark, you can chime in or anybody can chime in. I think one would say with a variety of the changes that we're going through, whether that would be Fort Calhoun on some of our fossil generating fleet, some of the business technology, each of the organizational changes that are going on in the organization, we could probably justify and say, well, it's just the change stuff that's going on, and we should understand that that's what these scores represent. I don't think the senior team looks at it that way at all. I think we look at it as everything that we do should be around kind of these pieces on accountability and recognition and our continual leadership of the organization. And so we're taking it very seriously around the senior team, and each of the business units are beginning to craft not only what we are going to do corporately, but then what they want to do within their own business units very clearly. So.
Amy, step up to the podium real quick. Sure. Just talk about what we're going to be doing.
Good morning. So just to add on to just what Tim was saying, we're really focusing on two levels of action planning. One is on the leadership level and one is on the organizational level. And on the leadership level, we have a framework that we are all utilizing to drive consistency and accountability with all of our leaders to help them. So they are in the process over the next couple of months, from August through September, to view their results with their teams, learn with their teams what might be issues for them, and then to do some action planning and to monitor. So we're providing workshops and tools and resources for all leaders to drive that consistency. At an organizational level, we'll be focusing on those two areas that Megan just talked about, accountability and recognition. So we are beginning the process of working with the senior management team to outline their vision and principles and parameters around those two areas, and then we're going to drive that through the organization so that we have consistency broadly. So that is our plan.
Drive it down through the organization. I get management, but how do you drive it down? How do we get results and information from employees that feel disengaged? How do we ramp that up and help them become more engaged?
I think there are a number of different approaches. I think last year, the senior management team, one of the things that they did consistently was go out to the field, basically, and through roundtables and make sure that we have two-way dialogue going on consistently. So that has definitely been an accountability across the senior management team. I think we're still in the process of building capability with our leaders around how to replicate that process and do it consistently. We'll be looking at a couple of innovative ways this year. We'll be presenting, working with the senior management team. We have a couple of great leadership development programs going on right now, and seeing if we can leverage some of our key talent here to help sort of come up with solutions to how we want to creatively and innovatively drive it down to the organization.
With us through the next year, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think either through the one-on-ones I do on a quarterly basis, or we'll do maybe a quarterly dive on what that may look like. I think one of the things that we have in place are key accountability, certainly from our leadership perspective, from the senior management team all the way down to the first level supervisor, that you will see these actions cascade down through those key accountability documents and accountability with that leadership group as well as the senior team, and it'll track all the way down. And that's one of the ways where we kind of drive it in the organization, but we want to do it with the same quality kind of across the organization as well.
Yeah.
We also now have the ability to do pulse surveys, and so we can do a quick survey with a smaller group on a periodic basis to see where we're getting traction and where we're not.
Oh, terrific.
I think this is a really good effort and really good analysis, but I think it's incomplete. The fact that we only have 78% response gives me a lot of heartburn, because I think the more engaged somebody is, the more likely they are to fill out a survey. And the reverse is true. So are we masking a much larger disengaged population? And we do it every year so we don't see it, but it's there. So my question is, why isn't this a mandatory survey? Why don't we require it?
For one thing, it's anonymous,
Well, that's okay.
so it's hard for us to tell who's done it and who hasn't. But I think the other thing is that, and I'll let Megan address it as well, but 78% is not a bad response rate on this type of a survey. Not saying we don't want more, but it's really not a bad response rate. We have an awful lot of people that are in the field on a regular basis, and don't necessarily have the time or the inclination to sit down at a computer and do this. We also had an issue, and we sometimes do, with we've been driving a lot of email phishing campaigns here, and people have gotten caught in those, and so they're a little leery about things that are coming in from outside the organization, and this email does. So sometimes they just don't respond to it. But your point's very well taken. We do need to continue to drive to have more people take this survey, and we will continue to push that in any way that we can.
Well, have you thought about putting an incentive out there for it? I mean, you get something in return, or?
Yeah, so we actually do some studies. Do you want me to?
Please,
Okay.
go ahead. Yeah, just
Sorry.
outside the mic there.
We actually do a lot of studies on the population that does not typically respond in surveys because we've gotten that question for years. And it's not indicative of them being more disengaged in the rest of the organization. They're probably actually falling within that moderately contributing bucket, that light blue bucket overall. You do find your bookends always survey. Those who are very disengaged are the first ones to usually share that feedback, and those individuals that are highly engaged to share their feedback. So if we are missing a population, it would be in the middle, but a couple things to think about. Your response rate is higher than organizationally on average. So for your size, we typically see low 70s, sometimes high 60s, and so you're stronger there. The other thing to think about is if we start incentivizing employees or making it mandatory, a lot of times we get false data. People will just, and we see this because we do studies around the time it takes someone to take the survey and at what ratings. So people will just go through and mark all 3s or all 6s or all 1s because they were put into a place to get an incentive or to be forced. So in a survey where we're taking the feedback and trying to drive change, we want it to be as authentic and forward as possible. I think your point is very valid, though, that we want to capture as many employees' voice, and so we need to keep striving for that. One of the ways to drive participation is to actually drive improvement from feedback. So the more we follow up on someone's feedback, the more the organization next year will say, I actually can make a difference in how we're shaping the culture here. So that's what we would encourage from our experience.
Which then goes to the lowest scoring question, correct?
Right.
Yes. Yep. Yes, correct.
I had just a mechanical question here. What was your, in the benchmarking utilities, you know what the number was, what N was for utility?
Is your employee count or the employee response or company size?
Company size was, so yeah, how many companies are you comparing us against that are utilities?
Yep. So we usually have benchmarks. No, our minimum threshold for benchmarks are 50 companies or more. So that means that benchmark has at least 50 companies, and I can follow up with the exact numbers and employee counts. But our benchmarks have to have 50 companies and over 100,000 employee responses to constitute a benchmark.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I have a couple mechanical questions too. And I'm going to suggest that you stay close to the mic. I watched the video last time when I missed, and it's really helpful. I'm going to remind us because we've got 2 board members that are missing.
Okay.
And I'm sure they'll watch it later. I want to make sure that I understand that one of the first things that you talked about, the engagement index, the favorability overall and the overall score, and in particular how that relates to the number that we're tracking for our SD. So I think what I really need is an explanation for what the difference is between the favorability overall. I think that's the 5 or 6,
Yep.
right? Versus the overall score. How do you arrive at the overall score?
The overall score is just the average of a 6-point scale converted to a 100-point scale.
Got it. Okay.
And one of the why we focus on favorability is because it's really that goal state. You're looking at the percent of population that is in that goal state, and it's not being diluted. So if you just take overall score, sometimes you can be diluted by equal parts on the ends or a lot of people in the middle, and you're missing the story, which is why at the item level we focus on favorability.
Okay, that's helpful. I don't know if now is the time to ask this question, but I can't help but wonder if we're tracking the right metric on our SD then.
Your overall score
Yeah.
of you have to see significant improvement in favorability to impact that overall.
Sure.
It's why we as a senior management team break out all different views just so we're getting that clear picture. Tracking overall score is the metric that was set because that is the metric too that is in comparison to best places to work, that
Okay.
overall score. You have to see improvement in favorability to see overall
Never see
score
that
rise.
move. Okay, so one sort of drives the
Yep.
other. Okay. Is there any merit to, we have a lot of people in the 15-plus year bucket, is there any merit to breaking that up so that we get more detailed information on larger tenures?
Yep, we can definitely break that up to see if it spikes up later. So that'll be a takeaway we can come up with.
Yeah, that's some of the same conversations we've had at the senior level, is to take some of those and grab some of that data. This is the same presentation that the employees saw, I think, on the web very clearly. And so we wanted to make sure you had the opportunity to see what our employees saw a week ago, or a week and a half ago, I think. And so they saw this as well. They have the opportunity, and we've given it to the union leadership as well, to dive into some of their information if they would like that. And so each of the supervisors, managers, directors, VPs are diving in, asking some of those very specific questions on their very specific business units as well.
A couple other clarification questions. The pay group difference between looking at our labor unions, you said they're slightly lower as normal. I guess I'm interested in more clarification on what slightly normal or slightly lower is. I mean, are we in the ballpark? Are we significantly lower?
Nope, you're in the range of average difference, and a lot of times it's because individuals that are union are experiencing some different dynamics around. Maybe it's harder to communicate to them. It's harder to get time with leadership. Oftentimes our union populations are out in the field, where non-union populations are kind of at the corporate level or the central level. So they are exposed to different types of dynamics. So it's not concerning the gap we saw between your non-union and union populations.
So it's pretty typical compared to what you see?
Yes,
okay.
correct.
Okay. I think that might be it for me.
Well, I have one more. On your engagement defined slide where you talk about you Venn diagram, clarity, connection, and care, is there some research foundation for that bucketing, or I'm just curious how that happens?
So our engagement model around advocacy, intent to stay, and discretionary effort, we validate that model around the engagement behaviors. Every 3 years we validate our model. Clarity, connection, and care is language here that we're really using as a foundation for managers and leaders to start with that to drive engagement. You have to have a foundation of clarity for an individual in their role. As an organization, we want to demonstrate our care to those employees. And the connection is about bridging the gap between individuals and their organization, individual and the work. So those 3 C's are language that we've developed here as kind of our slogan to drive engagement in the organization.
Okay. And your every 3 years, your verification, that's your own model and your own verification. It doesn't come out of some literature out of HBR or something?
Correct. Okay. The model of advocacy, intent to stay, discretionary effort, tapping into the individual's connection to work, team, and organization is very standard in the industry. That is majority of industry's models. What we do is validate the way we write the questions and we test different ways of asking the questions, especially in our Best Places to Work program, to make sure that we are not tripping up employees asking questions a certain way, that we're keeping the concept of engagement and those outcomes very simplified.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So not a question, just a comment. It's great to see good progress, right? We made some significant headway year over year, and that's really exciting to see and impressive. I don't have a concern about the response rate. Quite honestly, 78% seems high to me. So, but as I think I heard you say a few times during the presentation, we've got some work to do, right? Those engagement drivers are low scores, and there's an opportunity for us to continue to improve there. To me, this is one of the more important strategic directives that we have, and our organization can only be successful if our people are succeeding. And to Tim's point, it's easy to look at some results and say, well, we've been in constant change. This industry is going to be in constant change for a while. So preparing people for that is very important. So this is good work. Thank you. Let's keep going.
Yeah, I think our words is we're pleased but not satisfied, right?
Yeah.
So we'll continue to put together those work plans. We'll share those with the board as we develop those, and so you'll have the opportunity to see those. So, thanks.
I want to thank the ladies that are here. Megan, thank you for your support. Angela and Amy, thank you for driving this. And Jennifer Johnston, who has been the leader of the strategic initiative for Best Places to Work, isn't here today, but she's done a lot of work on this as well. So I just wanted to acknowledge her. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
All right, and the next item on our agenda is the Employee Relations Monitoring Report. All right, so this is to review SD8, which is employee relations. This is just a quick review of the policy, and I will go through each of those statements one by one and give you some information about what we're doing. So engage its workforce in personal and professional development. In 2017, OPPD's senior leadership team worked together to develop and implement the OPPD talent philosophy and a leadership framework around leadership behaviors for all levels in the OPPD organization. We are still working on level 1 leadership behaviors, but those are coming. The talent philosophy is driven by 5 key philosophies that are supported through the various human capital processes that drive selection, alignment, development, and engagement. Toward the end of last year, we completed our first integrated talent review for all exempt employees. And this is a process where we evaluate all of our exempt talent. If you're familiar with business processes, this is what you would refer to as a 9-box. We look at potential and performance and plot every employee on that basis. Once those evaluations are complete, they're reviewed by the manager once removed from the employees and their direct reports to make sure that there is consistency across the way that we are doing that in the organization. We drove meaningful conversations with employees about where they fell and what their future roles might be by this process. Each exempt employee is required to have an individual development plan that's prepared between the employee, the manager, and the manager once removed. And it's supposed to be a robust plan to develop the employee toward agreed upon career goals. We are working through the leadership behaviors to continue to make those more and more robust. And as we're developing curriculum in Empowered University, we have opportunities to support that growth and development. So Empowered University launched last year. It helped to address some of the comments we received in our 2017 Best Places to Work for You survey around development. There are several different tracks in the curriculum, and eventually we will cover employees at all levels. We are continuing to build out that curriculum. All employees have access to our employee education program, and we currently have 46 employees that are taking advantage of that tuition reimbursement opportunity to continue their education through local universities and colleges. And many of our employees also participate in subject matter specific off-site training opportunities. So this is just a quick overview of everything that's going on in Empowered U for 2018, and we will continue build out of the university curriculum into 2019. We maintain and communicate written policies that define procedures and expectations for staff and provide for effective handling of grievances. We have a number of different ways that employees can report concerns or grievances. Through the collective bargaining agreements, they outline steps and expectations for a 3-step procedure for handling any grievance about how the contract is administered. We maintain corporate policies, procedures, an employee handbook, a code of conduct similar to what the board has. And then we also have an ethics point opportunity. People can report anonymously any concerns they have around human resources matters, security, fraud, any of those types of things. We are seeing those complaints go down, they're not going up. And most of them tend to be matters that could be resolved between supervisors and employees. So we work through those as they're turned in. We also have opportunity for people to file internal complaints if they need to through a formal process. Those are investigated depending on the subject matter, either by human resources, by security, or by an outside counsel if that's necessary. And then we also have external complaints that are filed, which are usually legal claims that the company deals with. And Steve Bruckner does provide reports to the board on an ongoing basis of where those claims are. We bargain in good faith with the official agents of represented employees and comply with collective bargaining agreements. We did negotiate 5-year agreements in 2017. Since then, we continue to negotiate memorandum and letters of understanding with the unions on items that aren't specifically spelled out in the contract. During the next round of negotiations, those usually get pulled into the contract, but that's going on an ongoing basis. And we are having quarterly benefits topics meetings with the unions on a regular basis with our benefits consultant, and it's really to help everyone understand how our benefits are structured, how we fare compared to other organizations in our consultant's book of business, and what is driving our costs around benefits. And then we also provide supervisor training for our supervisors on an ongoing basis through the leadership framework behaviors, expectations of leaders. We also do training on how to administer the collective bargaining agreements so that they are doing that appropriately. Achieve employee engagement of 85 by 2020. We conduct a periodic culture survey and provide an annual report of culture survey results to the board, which you just received. And then we provide an annual report to the board on OPPD's affirmative action plan. We currently have, because we are a government contractor, we are required to comply with the rules around affirmative action and file an affirmative action plan. This year we have 3 specific goals. One is at the Elkhorn Center for females and technical supervision roles, which are non-traditional roles for women. We also have a goal at Energy Plaza for females at the director level. And we have a goal at Fort Calhoun Station for some technical individuals. So they're chemists and folks like that. We have 3 goals this year. We had 13 last year. We are making progress as we're moving through our hiring and moving people, promoting people within the organization. For veterans and disabilities, those are mandated percentages through the government. So we are mandated to have to work towards 7% of veterans within the organization. We're currently at 6.7%. And to work toward 12% of individuals with qualified disability, we're currently at 3.5%. So we have significant work to do there. What we are required to do is to make good faith efforts, which means we want to continue to do things that will help us move toward those goals. So we have developed the Legacy I3 program, which many of you are familiar with. We did a gender and ethnic equity analysis this year, and we made adjustments for over 20 people to make sure that we were being as equitable as possible in our pay practices. We have many partnerships with colleges and universities and community and agencies to try to help bring new talent and diverse talent into our talent pools. And then we also have our employee resource groups who help us quite often when we're out recruiting. And then we do pre-hire huddles with managers to make sure that we understand what the goals are for each position that we're filling. The recommendation is the Governance Committee has reviewed and accepted this monitoring report and recommends that the board find OPPD to be sufficiently in compliance with Board Policy SD 8. Questions?
I got a few questions.
Sure.
I think it was the second slide, you talked about the individual development plans. And I think I heard you say that those are for exempt employees.
They are currently.
A couple questions, all exempt employees?
Yes.
Okay. And have we considered whether or not it makes any sense to do that for non-exempt?
We will be doing that at some future date. We need to get to the point, Craig, where we have key accountabilities for those individuals and the leadership behaviors in place.
Okay.
And then we will be able to require those.
The reference to bargaining good faith with the official agents, et cetera, et cetera. The only question that raised in my mind was, I think it's fair to say that the act of bargaining is sort of a two-party deal. And I look at this, and this is the indication of representation on the part of one of those two parties, and I'm sort of interested in the extent to which we've gotten confirmation or affirmation from the other party that there was indeed bargaining in good faith. My understanding is that the negotiations were fairly productive last year, but just in terms of, and I know it's probably, maybe that's 2 years back, so we're really only reflecting on the last 12 months. Anyway, the flag for me was just we're only really getting input from one of those two parties in this process.
Yeah, I think, the key thing for me is, do we have a good relationship and a trusting relationship with the union representatives? And Danny's here and can probably speak to that a little bit, but we did, at one point, Chris Wright, who's the vice president for Local 763, and Doug Madison, who's the president of Local 763, we went down to Kansas City Power and Light to do some exploration of a program that they have around working crew leaders. And one of the things that Chris said when he was talking to the representatives there was that it's the best he's ever seen the relationship. So that was good to hear. I think we've been working through, we had a backlog of grievances, and just in working together with the unions, we've settled out about 100 of those.
Okay.
So we're working very hard on that relationship and making sure that we're continuing to work with them in good faith.
Okay.
To reinforce that, maybe, I don't know. Did you not say, Tim, that the survey results were then given back to the leadership, and
Yeah.
they have their opportunity to go through that data as well?
And I would just say to the percent participation, I mean, I received several emails from, and I sent some of them to the senior team, of individuals within the organization going, I cannot believe only 79%, given the opportunity, would not have. And this was a electrician in one of our operating groups, and he said, Mr. Burke, I commit, I'm going to get more in my group next year. And I said, hey, that's great. It's better for you to do that than for me to do that. So, so I think it's that kind of, positive relationship. I think a couple things. I get the opportunity to meet with the union leadership on a sometimes a quarterly basis. I know Mark and I on 1483 are meeting on a quarterly basis. Certainly Doug and Chris and I, and then when I'm down in Nebraska City, I meet with Scott Palma down on a Local 31 side. Since he's down there most of the time. But I know the senior team is also meeting with them on a periodic basis as well. And I think that's just increasing the communication and anticipation of other things that may be going on in each of the business units. And they have the opportunity to weigh in and give a perspective on as well earlier than waiting for the decision to be made and then here's what it is, here's what the impact is.
My last question is on the annual report to the board. Is that slide considered our annual report, or is there something else that we should be expecting?
It is. I will also make sure that the affirmative action plan is in the resource center for you to review.
That'd be great.
If you choose to.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, and then just lastly, we would encourage the governance committee to consider refining the statement, achieve employee engagement of 85 by 2020, to be more directional as the other strategic directives are, and just say to achieve employee engagement of 85. Consideration.
On that one, Mark, so if we're gonna do that, this is on the agenda to be approved on Thursday,
The monitoring
right?
report, yes.
So when would we add anything to this?
I'm gonna let Scott.
Scott?
As you remember at the end, what we wanted to do is walk through all of our monitoring reports and have the focus for the monitoring report be the monitoring report. This is one of the recommendations that MART is making and reviewing with governance. The notion would be that all board members would have an opportunity to review the policy, provide feedback between now and ideally the end of the month. And if there are other suggestions for refinement, then those would be consolidated and there would be a governance committee convened to review those and to discuss them. This is one that would be reviewed. So the notion is that next month, this would be set up as a policy refinement. It could just be on a standing agenda if there's no issues or discussion to be had around this, and then it would move forward. Or if it was determined that the committee should be discussing it, then we would pull it back into committee for review. So does that answer your question?
Well, kind of, so would we actually have to vote on it to change this?
It does.
So it's just such a small little change. I mean, sometimes I just think we go on and on and on. These things never resolve themselves. So you're talking 2-3 months down the road, we'd have to vote on this again just to change that?
The notion would be that it'd be presented as a draft policy
Can't
for
we just
review
vote
next
on it
year.
right now and change it Thursday?
Well, I think Scott's point is, are there other input from the board on any other changes on this?
It never ends.
And all those changes would be then given to the governance committee to review and identify and come back to the board with any recommended changes. This may or may not be one of them.
Couldn't we just make an amendment on Thursday?
We could, but I think there would be some discussion about the wisdom of removing dates, whether we should change the date.
Yeah,
You
I don't
know,
want to muddy
a
the
goal
waters. I
should
just go
should typically have
the
a date.
process of what we're doing, trying to simplify it.
So that's why we don't get it done.
Because I
Yeah.
get,
You're about that kind
I mean, it just seems like we keep going through all these, which we're supposed to do, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
that's the whole idea. But just some set schedule that we have, but I don't want to muddy the waters. To me, it seems like a simple change we could just do
Right.
like that.
The established schedule would just be next
Yeah.
month. It could be a quick reporting item to say, this is what the proposed change
Yeah.
is, and off
So
we
on
go.
Thursday, this is on the consent agenda for Thursday, what we have now existing. Any other changes you'd want? Talk to anybody on the governance committee or?
Right. To
Speak to
clarify,
Scott.
we'll send out, Kristen and I will send out an email to the board asking if there's any other changes they would like to see in this policy. And again, there may be no need for a governance committee meeting. It might simply be to just pass it through,
Then we just-
at which point it will just go through next month, really as a very
Oh, okay.
simple consent item agenda. But we'll determine, I think, through the committee discussion or feedback, if there's significant need for other considerations or changes. Ultimately, with the strategic direction policy, we want to ensure that this still really reflects the consensus of the board in terms of what the strategic direction is. And because these are developed in a specific point in time, it just allows us on an annual basis to tee up the question, is this still reflective of the strategic direction the board wishes for us to pursue?
Right.
So that's really the question that will be posed in survey format, an opportunity for feedback. And I think, there'll be many, I think, that just go through as quickly as you're talking about.
So
Or forget anything.
I appreciate, asking for strategic direction, and yet we still have the responsibility to measure and monitor. I'm just
Yeah.
saying.
Yes. Any other thoughts? Or
This one's a little bit like pushing a rope. I'm not sure you can make it happen. Okay, so you can put all the dates out there you want, but I don't think you can make it happen. We can try and try and try. So I think directional is probably more appropriate personally, but that's just my opinion.
Mechanics question,
Yes,
is
sir.
now the time to have a discussion about this, or is that next month?
That'd
After
be
we
next
get the
month.
full suite of potential?
That'd be next
Okay,
month.
got it, all right.
Thank you.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Yeah.
I was
I
like,
just
when
want to
is a
confirm.
good time to talk about
Yep.
all this? It seems like it just goes on and on.
I have the
Which
same
get,
question,
we're
yeah.
supposed to, but
Are we good?
we're good. Yeah, we're good.
Thank you.
Mark's not done yet.
Well, she's been doing a good job.
Got another hour to go.
All right, as part of our ongoing review and with Michelle Pinder being new to the organization, we have asked our legal counsel and benefits, this is Emily Langdon, who helps us and supports us on the benefits side, to do a complete review of our benefits statements, which she has done. And we have several restatements of policies for various reasons, so I will go through these quickly. The 401K retirement savings plan, we made sure that in the plan, we provide an option for plan members to make after-tax Roth contributions to the plan. The investment committee did approve the addition of a Roth option to our 401K and 457 plan, so this just makes provisions for that. It does provide for prepayments of principal and interest on loans made in whole or in part without penalty at termination of employment or after the loan has been outstanding for at least 12 months. The goal there is to encourage employees to pay loans as soon as possible so that they continue to build their savings for retirement. We have a provision that has been input into the restatements so that people don't have to obtain the maximum amount of loans from the plan before taking a hardship withdrawal, and that is due to the changes that were made through the Bipartisan Budget Act. Also due to that, effective January 1, it provides that hardship distributions can be made from any sub-account within the employee member's account. So it doesn't have to go across all of them. It doesn't have to be made from any specific account within the 401K plan. So those are the restatements to the 401K plan.
Mark, is there a prepayment penalty in place for loans?
I'm not sure that it was a penalty, but you couldn't really pay.
Right, there was no penalty, you
Right.
just couldn't, you couldn't repay.
A portion.
A portion. You had to repay it all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And now the plan allows you to repay just a portion early.
Yeah.
All right, that makes sense.
For overtime.
Thank you.
And this change costs the district nothing. It just
Correct.
gives additional options to the employee to fit
Correct.
their personal
Yes.
situation.
Yes.
Good.
Any other questions?
The interest on the loan goes to?
It's paid back to the employee's account.
Paying it yourself,
Right. So
pretty typical.
what's the advantage of paying it early?
You still have to go for the money to pay back.
The advantage of paying it early is that if the stock market's doing well, your funds will grow.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
The money's not working for you.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
it's doing poorly, though.
right.
Thank you.
Yes. The restatement of the 457 retirement savings plan, these were done to revise the plan definitions to be more detailed and accurate and to better mirror our 401K retirement savings plan definitions. It revised the eligibility provisions to cover part-time employees who are covered under the collective bargaining agreement. And it adds the ability to make the after-tax Roth elective deferrals. It also provided for additional periodic withdrawal provisions if the total amount of the participants' interest under the plan exceeds $5,000 at the time the payment is due. So this gives easier access to employees to portions of their funds as they're going through the retirement process. Questions? All right, the next one is the restatement of the Omaha Public Power District Executive Life Insurance Plan. We revised the normal retirement date and early retirement date provisions to mirror the definitions under our retirement plan. Revised the retirement date provisions to account for situations where participants are employed beyond the normal retirement date, which is 65. Revises the plan administrator role to reflect current practices, and revises the claims procedure to comply with current law and practices. So this plan had not been restated for quite some time, so we wanted to make sure that it was up to date and reflective of current law. Questions on that one?
Nope. Doesn't.
Okay. The restatement of the Omaha Public Power District Retirees Medical Coverage Premium Plan for employees hired after December 31, 2007. We added a definition of full-time employee to mirror our retirement plan definition of full-time employee. Added a reference to the Rule of 75 to reflect the retirement plan change that was made in 2013. Revised the interest credit provision so that interest is credited on an annual rather than a quarterly basis. And I believe that's because we really don't have the capability to do it on a quarterly basis, or it was the original intent of the plan to do it annually. Is that correct?
It
Okay.
was the original intent of the plan to do it annually, and I believe it was being done annually. It was being done. Right.
Okay.
So it reflects the actual practice and the intent of OPPD.
And then it clarifies that no interest will be credited to forfeited accounts or to accounts once a potential retiree does become a retiree participant. And clarified the administrator reserves the right to determine whether any contributions to the trust are required at any point in time based on calculations performed by the plan actuary, as is the case in our other plans. And finally, the restatement of our retirement plan. When it was restated, effective January 1, 2018, one amendment to the prior plan that was amended and restated effective January 1 was overlooked and not incorporated, so this simply corrects that Scrivener's error. Okay. Thank you.
All right. So
And
that's, Go ahead.
The last item on the agenda is an amendment to Resolution 6253, which was the resolution to provide an increase to CEO Timothy Burke. And I apologize to the board for the error. His effective date should have been June 1st, which is his anniversary date. The document said July 1st, so this resolution is to correct my error. I apologize to the board for that.
Okay, thanks, Mort. So all these are on the consent agenda, but there's a lot thrown at you. If there's any questions between now and Thursday, talk to Mart. She'll get you in touch with whoever can answer these questions because they're fairly complex. But, and then if you still have a question, you can pull it off and put it on a regular agenda. So, but a lot of it's cleanup. Who can we thank for all this? Who is doing it?
So the team is here.
Yeah.
Mikkel Pinder, who's our Director of Total Rewards, Vicki Lee, who's our Senior Consultant on Benefits, and Emily Langdon, who's our Benefits Attorney. So thank you very much for all your
Yeah,
efforts on
it's
these.
good to catch all these things and clean them up, so. With that, you're done, huh?
Thank you.
For now. And then we will have a closed session.
Yes.
As we get closer to that, so. That's all.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Thanks, Ron.
Before we finance, Mick? Mick's going to defer.
Yes, sir, I defer.
Are you sure?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to present the July financial results. I'm going to summarize the story for July, and it is that it was a cooler than normal month. It's been very interesting to see the temperatures and the swings that we've seen in the past few months. We experienced the coolest April in the past 25 years, followed by the warmest May in the past 25 years, followed by the second warmest June in the past 25 years. So cool to very, very hot to a lower than average temperatures in July. The first 2 weeks of July were relatively high and tracking to historic averages. The second last weeks in July, temperatures dropped significantly. That tells a story of retail revenues in July being $107.4 million, which is $7.3 million under budget. It's our customer owners using less power than they have used in the past because of air conditionings and heating temperatures. Off-system sales revenues were $13.2 million, which is $3.3 million over budget. Other income for July was $4.6 million, which is $1.1 million under budget, and that continues to reflect the trend of interest rates as interest rates continue to rise. Mark-to-market value of some of our investments which are reflected in other income continues to decline on a mark-to-market basis. Again, our strategy is to buy and hold investments, and we're not expecting for these losses to materialize, but they are mark-to-market every month, and that reflects that $1.1 million under budget on other income. On the side of the business that we have a lot more control over, things are looking significantly better. Operations and maintenance expenses, excluding fuel and purchase power for July, were $28.3 million, just slightly under budget, again reflecting all the good work that we continue to make at the district with Center of Excellence and lean processes to continue to save money and find more efficient ways to do work. Fuel and purchase power expenses, especially in the purchase power expenses for July, were $34.4 million, which is $4.8 million over budget. Again, this is just part of the market dynamics. We sold $3.3 million into the market. That's off-system sales. However, we purchased, between purchases and fuel, we were $4.8 million over budget. Other expenses for July are pretty much on target. They were $500,000 over budget. Really a minor variance there. These combination of results have us with a net income for July of $26.9 million, which is $10.4 million under budget for the month of July, and cumulative year to date is we are at $6.6 million under budget. Remember last month and the previous 2 months, we had really strong revenue months, and our net income for the year-to-date was now in the positive range. The cold July is putting us now down in the negative range of 6.6. Still pretty close to budget, nothing that really concerns me. It's part of the volatility we see with temperatures in the region. Capital expenditures for July were $6.6 million. It's just $1 million under budget. We continue to make a lot of progress with capital projects. As the summer wraps up and we go into the fall season, we're going to be paying a lot of attention on these capital projects, making sure that we're completing as many as we can before the winter comes on us and some of those projects slow down. Unrestricted cash balance at the end of July was $420.6 million, which is, again, $66.1 million over budget. This includes cash carryover from 2016 to 2017 to 2018. We have not calibrated the cash threshold, and that's why we're showing $66 million over budget. It's really not cash that we have accumulated this year. It's part of the cash that we accumulated last year going into this year. A very important note here, and in fact, I may have to step out from the meeting at around 11 this morning. We are, next month, expect our cash balances to drop for 1 month because we're doing the cash defeasance of debt that we explained at last board's meeting, and the board approved the resolution to issue debt. We're going to proceed with the cash defeasance this week, with a settlement happening next week. The bond issue to replenish cash will not happen until September. Remember, we have to have a separation, a certain number of weeks. So very likely for the August report, you will see a drop in cash. I'm just letting you know what the reason for that's going to be. And then I expect that for the September report that we present in October, you'll see that cash replenish back. And hopefully I have good news on interest savings for the district. And hopefully I will have.
Thanks for over that. Appreciate it.
Yeah. That's it on the financial reports. Any questions?
I have a question on the volatility of the weather. You know, every year it's like, is it hot? You were still in August. It was hot last week. What is the window there that you really look at? I mean, there's nothing you can do about it really. But what is the window? April, the end of August, into September, or where we make it or break it, kind of? I mean, when are we out of the woods? October, obviously.
He's going to pin me down to a date.
Well, no, I mean ballpark.
It's really the summer months now, or the warm months. And something important here is when the warm months start. This year they started a lot earlier. We had a really warm May. Typically that's not the case, and so we have we're seeing some of those revenues came in earlier than expected. We're looking at potentially going all the way into September. Really, it's May through September where we have the peak months. Then we go into the shoulder months in October, November, and then the other shoulder months in February, March, and April. So we still have a couple of months of operations that should give us a good indication of how we're going to end the year.
So that's a little nerve-wracking depending on the weather. Hotter, obviously. But when you factor that in on you're making up our budgets for next year, our income and all that, I mean, you take trends and all that.
For sure.
I mean, what percent are we reliant on that the summers are going to be hot, basically? 35%, 50% of our, how do you?
That's an interesting point, and I can actually get you even more accurate information. But really what we're trying to do here is try to get it right, just right. Assuming cooler than normal temperatures could potentially result in higher rates, and that may not necessarily be the case. With the fact that we're experiencing a cooler July today might be a 1 year or a 2 year effect. And so we look at long-term studies with data from many years to try to make sure that we have the average and medians, depending on which metric we're using, to make sure that we try to hit the right temperature on average over time. So I'm not overly concerned. Last year we had a really warm summer. This year we're having a relatively cool summer. Next year could be exactly the opposite, the other way around. If after a number of years where we see a significant change in pattern, then that will start kicking into our load forecast and temperature forecast, and that will start being incorporated into our financials. But for now, this change really doesn't, in my opinion, doesn't necessarily construe anything that we need to change.
How much do we have in that rate stability fund? Didn't we put some money?
We have $50 million. The rate stabilization fund is fully funded at $50 million, and I do not expect us having to need any of
That's kind of
those
what it's
funds.
for, right?
We should be
Is that
fine.
why we have it, to balance these things?
For these type of events or for other unforeseen events that happen throughout the year,
Yeah.
events that would normally cause a rate increase, a rate stabilization, really what it does, it doesn't avoid a rate increase, it stabilizes a rate increase. And this is not in that camp at all. I believe that the variation is still small, and we can definitely, it's something that we've planned for, and we can live with that volatility.
Okay, and then one last question. You're gonna do the budget. Walk me through the timeline of when you start looking at the budget for the next year.
We are right in the middle of budget season right now. All of my peers are smiling because I'm asking them to develop their budgets.
When does the board, I'm talking board.
The board will get the first read of the budget in, I believe, in the October meeting. You will have a first read and then a comment period of 30 days, and we'll probably go into approval mode either in November or for sure no later than December. We are preparing all the budgets today. It's capital operations and maintenance budgets. Between now and October, it's heavy budget season for us, and you'll get to see a glimpse in October. I am fairly confident that we should be able to continue and maintain our commitment of a no general rate increase through 2018. That has been the marching orders, and I think everybody's coming in at that level.
All right, thanks.
Just by way, the weather questions are good. By way of information, looking at heating degree days and cooling degree days, April average is 462 heating degree days. This year was 604, which is the second highest, going back to 1975. And for cooling degree days, May was, average is 48. We had 217 cooling degree days in May of this year, which was, I believe, the highest since 1975. June was also very high, abnormally high. Average is 180. We were at 382. And they haven't posted July yet, but so given the abnormalities,
July was lower.
July was low. They just haven't posted it yet.
Right.
Given the abnormalities in the weather, we're weathering it quite well.
Nice pun.
But it's been very atypical from April, May, June, July. Like every month has been not normal.
It has, and this is an opportunity also to give kudos, because it's not only the revenue piece that affects us. We've had a very heavy storm season. So it's all the work that most team has put in restoring, and that work costs money. And in some cases, more money than we had budgeted for. So not only are we getting the downside of lower revenues, but potentially higher expenditures. And I believe Mo and his team have done a fantastic job trying to contain those costs, despite the fact that you've had to do a lot of storm work higher than what you typically do. Any other questions? Okay. The next item on the Finance Committee, it's the, if you remember, we do this every year. Customer have deposits with us for a number of reasons. A lot of them, it's just when you open an account and you have a deposit with us, but there are many other reasons why customers have deposits with OPPD. We credit back interest earnings to customers. And we change that interest rate on an annual basis depending on how much we earn. We pass that basically to pass through back to customers. The current interest rate as of, that has been in effect since September 1 of 2017 was 1%. And based on current market conditions and what we are earning in the fund, the proposal is to adjust that upwards to reflect a higher interest rate environment that we have today from 1% to 1.25%. To be effective September 1, 2018. So that's going to be for the board's consideration on Thursday. Oh, my apologies. It's formula-driven, that's right.
How much is in the customer security deposits, ballpark?
I don't have that amount. Do you?
I'll look it up.
I'll get back to you.
Yeah, no, that's no big deal. I just thought you know it.
I'll go back and respond, hopefully before the end of the committee meeting today. The next item on the agenda is a report. It's a reporting item on legal fees. Report of legal fees, expenses, and expenses paid to general counsel during the second quarter of 2018. As you can see on the report, legal fees and expenses paid to general counsel Fraser Stryker totaled $426,905.38. It includes all the services that are listed in the report. And I know Director Moody is going to ask me, so before he asks, for context, you've asked for context. Last year, second quarter of 2017, total fees paid to Fraser Stryker were $305,565.80. Higher this year, and I'll let Mr. Bruckner explain, but there's been a significantly higher volume of work on environmental issues, on contract reviews, economic development. It's been a heavy quarter, heavier than usual. I don't know if there's anything else.
You described it well. There are some pretty major economic development projects that have required a lot of work. And this does fluctuate from time to time. This is a tad higher than we've seen over the last few quarters, but others have been lower. So it's not linear, typically. Really depends on the work. I would think that, year over year will be pretty similar to where we've been.
You're welcome. The next item is a report on the retirement plan. These are our pension plan for the second quarter of 2018. If you remember the first quarter, we had a really bad first quarter. We had 2 bad months, lots of losses, and the first quarter wasn't great. In fact, we lost money on the fund. And the story is similar, although not as dramatic as it was in the first quarter. Returns for the second quarter of 2018 were in the negative range still, unfortunately, of 0.60% negative returns for the quarter. Something that it's international equities, international fixed income, and in fact, some of the domestic equities haven't necessarily performed as we expected them to perform. Point of comparison and context, the plan, we're counting on a 7% annualized return. So on a linear basis, half the year has gone by, I would have expected to see a 3.5% return, and we're in the negative 0.6. So the year is not necessarily panning out to be an average year either, not in weather and not in market returns. Something that's encouraging, and I'm very pleased to see, is how different asset categories are playing off of each other. And something that Director McGuire mentioned last quarter, seeing the private real estate, which we voted on and we approved to have it as part of our portfolio, continue to return positive returns. And the reason we put in asset categories like that one was to offset negative returns that we see on the market every now and then. So this is, the portfolio is doing exactly what it was designed to do. The fact that it's low, it's just part of the global economy and domestic economy, but it's actually holding on pretty well. We'll continue to report the next couple of quarters, and of course at the end of the year on how the plan did. I am not optimistic that we will hit the 7%, I think for obvious reasons, but one can always hope for better returns. Okay, and the last reporting item, as some of you may or may not know, OPPD has a line of credit currently with Bank of America for $250 million. Part of that is, about $100 million of that is for liquidity for working capital. We haven't needed the line of credit. We have not drawn on the line of credit, but it's always good to have sources of liquidity, just for liquidity planning. And $150 million of that line is something that we use and we plan for our commercial paper program. It's a form of variable rate debt we have. It's not necessarily variable rate debt, but it's debt that resets every less than 270 days. And having a $150 million line of credit with Bank of America allows us the flexibility that if we have to repurchase that debt back, we wouldn't necessarily have to tap into our own liquidity. We have that line of credit. Again, thankfully, knocking wood here, we haven't had to use that line of credit, but it's always good to have it ready. That line of credit expires October 1 of this year, so we went out and issued RFPs to different national banks, and we got really strong responses from a few of them, and Bank of America continued to be the best response we received, and we awarded the line of credit to Bank of America just for one more year, through October 1 of 2019. At which point we will go back again and reassess the market. The team believed that the one-year award was advantageous for the district. So this is a reporting item. Our financial advisor, Barclays Capital, has been behind all of these and providing us advice, and they agree with the award.
Is it normally 1 year, or is it, what are these agreements?
We received bids from anywhere between 1, 2, and 3 years. Of course, the longer you go, the higher the rate. Yep. and different covenants. And we believe that our best bid was to take the 1-year bid from Bank of America, and we will go out again next year.
Okay.
Do we pay a fee to have this ability, or only if we
Yes.
use it?
Yes, no, we pay a fee because we're asking the bank to hold liquidity for us, and it's liquidity that it's available on a phone call's notice, maybe more than a phone call if you have paperwork, but it costs them money to hold that for us. So we do pay a fee, but it's certainly something that we're willing to pay, and it's part of our liquidity plan that we've had for many years.
Just, did Tim get an update on the balance at all?
I believe it is 28 million, but I'm trying to confirm that.
All right.
So that's for the customer
I was gonna
deposits.
say that was the range,
If it's
so it sounds,
ballpark,
yeah.
I just wonder if it's 280 million. I mean, it's not
No,
enough
no,
to worry
no.
about, but
To a tenth of
20
that.
million is 20 million.
Yeah.
Actually, we try to get the deposits back into the customer hands when their credit is good.
I wouldn't think you'd be
So,
sitting on a lot of.
It doesn't do us good, it does them better, but for those commercial accounts or early on accounts, but if they have a good pay history, we try to get that back into their hands.
And this is where they put the money in, when they say security deposit, I'm assuming a new business, let's say, here's your estimated
Right.
usage, you're gonna put it in there, you then make your
Right,
payments.
we hold it in segregated funds and then we pay them interest when we
Yeah,
refund the money to
right.
them. And we refund it based on their payment history. So if they have good payment history, like for a residential customer, after 2 years, we'll refund the balance.
Yeah.
A lot of customers now are avoiding that by signing up for automatic bill pay, so their bills are automatically paid, and we avoid the having to assess a deposit. So it's beneficial to both of us.
Yeah.
That concludes the reports from the Finance Committee, unless there are any other questions. Thank you.
Is that it for finance? Okay. Next up is nuclear, and Director Barrett's not here today. Mary, did you want to handle it, or is there someone else from the committee need to step in, or is?
That's fine. I'll handle it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nuclear Oversight Committee had a few things to report today. The overall performance of decommissioning continues to be strong. Our asbestos removal project has recommenced. We had loaned our employees from Fort Calhoun to other areas in the district to do some abatement on asbestos, and now that they've concluded that, they've gone back to Fort Calhoun, and they are working now at Fort Calhoun on this asbestos removal project, so that is continuing on. Pleased to report that all of the personnel moves, we've been working on this since the first of the year, from the administration building over to the training building, are now complete. So that's obviously a milestone for us, and I think people are settling in relatively well. Activities associated with our dry storage CAS project continues on. We have 15 of the horizontal modules, bases complete, along with 21 roofs and 18 doors. That continues to have strong performance associated with it. On our quality assurance program, I had a report on some of their activities, and that ties in with the horizontal modules project, really focused on, from a quality assurance, quality control point of view, they're really focused on the building of these casks. And so they have been out to audit not only the concrete portion, which is going on site, but just last week, we started on the metal canisters. And so they're actually out visiting and watching them extrude metal and make sure that all of those processes are being followed closely, and that we are getting the correct material with the correct certifications for those liners that they're just now starting to build. Also, our quality assurance program has been focused on evaluating areas. We typically ask them to do management assessments prior to a nuclear regulatory commission inspection. Pleased to report that they have done one of those over the last month, and that was in preparation for our third quarter NRC inspection. The areas that they reviewed were adverse weather protection, self-assessment, auditing, corrective action at permanently shut down reactor plants. There was one deficiency in adverse weather protection and 3 deficiencies in self-assessment, audit, and corrective action. All these are minor issues associated with the programs that we have at Fort Calhoun. During last week, we had our Decommissioning Oversight Committee in to review the activities at Fort Calhoun, to ensure that from an outsider's perspective that we are meeting all the conditions and all of the regulatory commitments that we have. Pleased to report that the Oversight Committee gave us a lot to think about, as they always do, but it was also a very good report. As part of that committee meeting, there was a request from Director Trinan to really dig in a little bit and to report a bit more on the performance of Fort Calhoun. So I've asked Tim Muehling, who is our Senior Director of Nuclear Decommissioning, to come and give you a more in-depth assessment of the performance at Fort Calhoun. So Tim?
Good morning. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today to talk with you about decommissioning performance. We have several different views that we're going to go through today, but by and large what you're going to see is that the project is on schedule and it's under budget. And that's all due to the great work that the folks at Fort Calhoun Station and those from around the district supporting the project are doing, that they've really stepped up to the challenge. We'll start off with a few acronyms, and if I throw out more during this, please stop me and I'll explain those as well. CPI is Cost Performance Index, so it really is just evaluating, you said you were going to do this project for X number of dollars. Did you meet that? Did you go over? Did you go under? DCE is the Decommissioning Cost Estimate. That's the cost estimate for the entirety of the decommissioning project. That was done by a third-party vendor, and we'll talk more about that on one of these slides. The ISFC is the Independent Spent Fuel Storage Installation. That's where those concrete casks are going. That's where the fuel goes when it's in dry storage. And then SPI is Schedule Performance Index. So how are we doing against schedule? We said we were going to do 10 tasks. Did we get 10 tasks done? Then just reset us a bit. October of 2016 is when the plant shut down. So just a little under 2 years ago. And we entered into the Safe Store Decommissioning methodology. So our focus right now is preparing the plant to be in dormancy by the end of 2020. So one of the major pieces of that is to get the fuel moved, and we expect that to be done around the middle of 2020. So what's dormancy? It's nothing more than placing the structures and systems in a safe condition that we can maintain them until you go into active deconstruction. So the first look we're going to have here is the dormancy period and the estimate over the entire period. So this graph goes from 2016 when we shut down until the end of 2020. And the first set of bars that goes across there is the financial piece of it. So the estimate for the decommissioning period is about $500 million. To date, we've spent $185 million, but the good news to that is we've completed $191 million worth of activities. So every activity we do is given a value. We've completed $191 million worth of those activities for $185 million. So that's the under budget piece of this. The next two go together. It's activities and it's milestones. So you'll see that those two don't really line up. The number of activities and milestones is different percentage-wise, and that's just because every milestone has a different number of activities that go with it. Some milestones may have 5 activities, some may have 50. But both of those show that whether you look at it on a per activity basis or on a per milestone basis, what we've actually accomplished to date is right at what we plan to accomplish. Both are just slightly above accomplishment as opposed to plan, but effectively right on where we expected to be. Another way that we look at this is through our CPI and SPI, Cost Performance Index and Schedule Performance Index. Now, the one we just looked at goes all the way back to October of 2016. This indicator goes to June of 2017 when we had our project in place, the metrics established, and we started tracking to these indicators. So since that time, our Cost Performance Index is 1.17, which means we've been 17% under what we expected to spend. The Schedule Performance Index is at 1.0, so we've got done the amount of work that we expected to get done. So we got it done what we were supposed to, but we were 17% under what we expected to spend. To make sure that the planning we're doing and estimating that we're doing lines up with the decommissioning cost estimate, we also compare our performance against what that estimate says. And against that estimate, once again, we're 17% under on the spend, but we've got 5% more of the work done than that decommissioning cost estimate had projected we would complete at this time. And speaking of decommissioning cost estimates, that estimate is updated annually, and it's updated for the work that we've accomplished. It's updated for the value of money. It's updated for schedule changes. So if you move an activity from one year to the next, all those things factor into the estimate. The 2017 decommissioning cost estimate is the first one that we did when we went into decommissioning, and that had a value of $1.3 billion in those 2016 dollars. Updated at the beginning of this year at 1.295 in 2017 dollars. So you can see that those are account for both the inflation and the work that we've accomplished to date. And here's one more way that we're looking at our performance. The orange bars are effectively budget or what we project to spend. So for 2017, it's the actual numbers. For 2018, it's actual to date plus what we project for the end of the year. And then 2019 and forward is what we're projecting to spend in those years. The green line represents the money that's going into the trust fund to pay for future work. So we're not only paying for what we're doing today, we're paying for the work that comes up in the future. The blue bars for 2017 is actual, and 2018 is projected based on what we know today. I would really refer to that as opportunity. It's the amount that we spent less than we had projected to for that year. So that extra money can be used to pull in additional activities to complete work earlier than we had anticipated, and or it can be used to offset the funding that we do in the future. It really gives us the flexibility to do what's right for the district while assuring the financial assurity of the decommissioning project. And then our trust funds. So we have 2 trust funds that we use, and I've just put the total in here. It's the 1990 fund and the 1992 fund, the years that those were put into place. At the end of 2016, we had $355 million in those funds. At the end of 2017, we had $421 million. And at the end of June this year, we were at $439 million. So those continue to rise as we would expect. So that's the financial piece. Here's really what work we're doing and what work we have to do before we get to dormancy. The big one is moving fuel. It's targeted to be done moving fuel in the middle of 2020. We will start in the 3rd or 4th quarter of 2019. It's in October, so I guess that's 4th quarter. So it's basically a canister a week that we'll do. And so when we tie that back to milestones, each one of those canisters will be a milestone to accomplish that work. Once that fuel is moved, we'll continue taking the rest of the systems out of service that are no longer required because the fuel is in that dry storage. That'll be done by the end of 2020. And then the other piece really is, it's the security plan, it's the security equipment, it's the organization, it's the processes, it's the procedures for when all the fuel is on that dry cask storage facility for that facility alone. So that's the other thing that we're currently working on. And then we've got some other activities in place that we're doing now that have to be done in decommissioning. They just wouldn't have to be done now, but we believe it provides value to the district and our customer owners by doing this work early. Mary talked about asbestos in her project update, so I'll pick that one. I wouldn't have to remove the asbestos now, but by taking it out now, it reduces that risk and that liability of that component remaining in the plants until we go into active deconstruction. So overall, I end where I started. The work is being done on time and it's being done under budget. And truly that speaks volumes to the folks, our folks and what they're doing and to their engagement levels. So we talked about the best places to work survey. We did see improvements at Fort Calhoun and it shows up in the daily work that's being done. Questions for me?
Fund. Can that money be invested at all, or does it basically have to sit dormant, or what does that money, does it work for us in the meantime, I guess?
So I'm going to defer because I think I know the answer to where it's invested.
It is invested. It is invested in fixed income securities, however.
So
Very conservative investments. Private utilities can invest these type of funds in equities, and they can earn a lot more or lose. In the case of this year, we have our funds in decommissioning are invested in fixed income securities. So that means that we have to deposit more because we're earning on average less, but it's a safer investment than otherwise an equity investment would be. So risk averse from that perspective, and it provides even more security for the fund.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Just a comment, Mary and Tim and everybody in Fort Calhoun, we as a board tend to expect that you're going to finish on time and on budget or under budget. This is such a big project and so important and so complicated. I'm amazed and thankful, and congratulations. This is outstanding. Outstanding. Thank you.
Well, that's good news.
I will tell you the conversation that we get at the DOC is we are unusual in this action. There are many people that are going through similar processes that are not on plan, that are not within budget, and they really attribute that effect to the leadership and the mindset change that the team spent a lot of time kind of going through and making sure we really thought about this, going from an operating plant to a safe store plant or a decommissioning plant. And I think the team has done that incredibly well. So from Mary to Tim to the directors to the managers, I think you asked how do you cascade that down. I think we have seen that at Fort Calhoun in that kind of performance. And it's really been, at least the feedback I get from the DOC, this is not typical. And so we'll have an opportunity to spend a little more time on this topic later. So.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask
a couple questions?
So first, it was a treat to be able to attend the DOC meeting. It was probably one of the more interesting, fascinating learning experiences I've had since I've been on the board. It was 2 hours of just soaking up information, and as I said in the meeting, I started to jot down all the superlatives that they were using. So kudos to you and your team.
Thank you.
You're doing an exceptional job, and that was evidence. That was 2 hours of evidence that that's happening. This report, I appreciate you asking for this because this is sort of the second report that we've had that demonstrates that as well. I don't know that I feel the need to see this monthly, but I am interested in some regular metrics that kind of give us an update on how it's going. Whatever that looks like, I don't know. I don't want to create a burdensome reporting, but it would be nice to see kind of how we're progressing. Couple questions just so that I understand, and most of these might be, well, I don't know who they'll go to. So we're roughly $500 million through 2020 is kind of the projection for what we'll spend, which leaves us another $700 million through the remainder of Safe Store. So my understanding of Safe Store is we get it on the pad, everything sort of goes dormant, and then we're just kind of sitting and waiting, security and a lot of other things. So can you help me understand how we're going to spend another $700 million over the course of 55 years?
Sure.
Just broadly?
Sure. If you think about this, we have a contingent of security and other folks that are going to be supporting that over 40-plus years. When you put wages and benefits into that, that's quite a large sum.
That's what it is? Okay.
So it is sitting there in dormancy, and even though we escalate that and then we do the net present value back, that's still a very large amount of money. At the end of that 40-plus years, what we do is we have to go in and deconstruct the facility.
Right.
So we have to remove all the radioactivity and then take it down to a greenfield. That's also a very large sum that's out there. In addition to that, we have to maintain all of the security around our spent fuel that's out on the SVC pad. So it's really those three categories.
Okay.
It's our license termination, where we remove all the radioactivity. It's our spent fuel management. And then it's continuing to make sure that we keep the buildings in a state where they're not crumbling, and we're going to have to do some maintenance and pay attention to those facilities going
Yeah.
forward. All of that over 40 or 50 years is
Okay.
quite a large amount of money.
Yep, it sure is. Okay. Then, so sort of related to that, the green bars, maybe just kind of ignorant question, but when it comes to funding, especially when I look at 2021 and 2022, those are very tall green bars. Where is our money? Is this annual net income, or is it?
Money we're recovering from customers every year.
Okay.
You see here in 2021 and 2022, according to the plan, there's less work done, so there's less orange.
Okay.
There's more green, but the overall amount, it's in the $150
Roughly the
million
same.
every year. That's
Okay.
the plan.
Okay.
So the bars are stacked,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
So that's why it looks like there's a larger component there, but it's just less work being done.
Okay. So when I look at 2017 as an example, the fund grew by what, 70, 80 million from end of 16 to 17?
No, it's only about, I'm trying to calculate the numbers here, about less than $10 million across, between the two categories you're talking about? Or are
No,
you
so
talking
I'm
about
looking
fund?
at the total decommissioning trust fund balance.
Oh,
So
Well, in there you have contributions and you also have earnings.
Okay, so that
So it's
Your
not all just
contributions have earnings,
contributions.
and then whatever we're under running our budget as well.
Right. Okay.
The blue bar.
Yeah.
Right. But really important here, just again, a context, a reminder, it's approximately $150 million that goes into some form of decommissioning, either work or funding the fund. That it's really replacing an almost $200 million operation and maintenance expense of the plant. So again, all in all, it's something that's resulting in savings for customer owners.
Right.
Through that. So it looks like a large amount.
Yep.
But it was much larger when it was owned.
Yeah.
Peter, did you say 200 or 204?
I said approximately 200.
Okay, thank you.
Approximately. I don't
Emphasis
know
on the
exact
approximately,
number.
thank you.
I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. That concludes the report for nuclear. Thank you.
Please.
For a break.
We
Try-
got
try to
several
keep it-
reports.
Hmm?
We got reports we're gonna be giving, so.
Okay.
Little break.
How long?
Like 10 minutes if we can.
10 minutes. Very good, sounds good.
Kim used to really write her on this. This is like a little report card for you, Chris. You can get back in 10 minutes. No pressure.
I'll try my best.
She'll write it. She'll write it hard. She'll write it hard.
members of management team to review potential refinements to the SD7, which is the Environmental Stewardship Monitoring Report. The committee moved discussion out of that subcommittee to share the potential policy refinements with the directors for your review. I know Mary Fisher has reached out to several of you that weren't on the committee to kind of just talk about refinements, context, education, address any questions you might have. We will look at those in the September meeting, any comments, and come back to you in September for further review and revision. So I know that's been of interest to everybody on the environmental stewardship end of things. So that's my update. We're going to have Julie is going to talk about the customer satisfaction monitoring report. So she'll walk us through that, SD5. So I'll turn it over to Julie.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Okay, I'm clicking the... Thank you. Wrong one. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to provide this update on our monitoring report for SD5, which is about customer satisfaction. Before I step through the monitoring report, though, I want to thank the employees and congratulate them really in the great work that they have done to, again, provide OPPD top rankings in our overall customer satisfaction for our Midwest mid-sized utilities. And so, you know, whether it's, this rating isn't just about the customer service that's provided, it really is representative of everything that every employee in this utility is doing. It's a reflection on our rates, it's a reflection on our reliability and the relationships and how we communicate with our customers in those interactions. So I want to make sure that we thank them. And then Michael Leary is here. In case there are any questions relative to some of the survey and feedback techniques that we're using to get the feedback from our customers. So SD5, the statement is essentially ensuring that we are seeking feedback from our customer owners and that we're using that feedback to better understand how we should be prioritizing not only our strategic plans but our operational goals to make sure that we're hitting on the things that really matter to our customers. And so the primary accountability is really, again, that how we rank on overall customer satisfaction. And so you will recall that late last year there was a board action to modify the language on this. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about the J.D. Power, and when I get to that slide you'll understand why we moved from a score of over 700 to a top quartile score within our segment. The other accountabilities that we have as a management team under SD5 really pertain to, again, getting the data, the customer feedback on a variety of things, whether it's new products and services, how we're performing with existing products and services, and then using that information to prioritize our work. But it's also indicating that we are going to interact with our customers in a respectful and dignified manner, which is obviously supported through our core values that we aspire to live up to. And then we want to provide ways for customers, if they feel that they haven't been treated fairly, we provide processes for them to escalate the issues so that we can address their concerns in a fair and equitable manner. And then finally, we provide periodic input or customer trend data to the board, and that is another thing that we modified last year, is that we would begin to provide more information relative to customer insights to the board. So I'm going to step through each of these and talk a little bit about what we do. So we have a variety of methods and tools that we use to get this feedback from our customers, and it really starts around that syndicated customer satisfaction index. This is a tool that allows us to benchmark against other utilities, and so that's the real value of this. For our residential study, we're using J.D. Power, and during the year we've switched to MSI to do our business study, and they both provide an overall customer satisfaction rating. We felt that the MSI solution for business would really provide us better benchmarking and provide a larger sample size so that we have more confidence in the data that we're seeing. So we'll see those results here in a moment. The OPPD online power panel and online chat. This is really a newer and innovative tool that we've been using to get feedback from our customers. And the innovative part of it is that when we have a product and service, or even a change that we want to make in a current customer service interaction, we're able to go out to a pool of 5,000 customers that have, I'll say, pre-signed up to be part of our survey pool. And so with that, the market research area is able to see that it represents our population, our demographics. And then when we have something we want to survey, we send out the email. They can respond to that survey. We have online chats as a really cool way. It's almost like an online focus group, if you will, where there's a moderator, they put a concept out there, and then we have online dialogue about what that might look like at OPPD and get their feedback about what direction they might want us to go. So for instance, last year we used that tool for community solar, for the electric vehicle program, pilot program, and then for some outage message testing that we've been doing. In the area of transactional and journey surveys, journeys is something that we added last year coming out of our customer experience strategic initiative that Steve Fanslaw and his team would have presented to you last fall. And the transactional aspect, though, is really when we survey our customers after they've had some sort of interaction with OPPD. So we're expanding on that work. The beginning of this year really has been working with market research to identify some transactional areas based on that journey data that we got, where we're wanting to focus on outage-related messaging and billing and payment methods. We are working with that team to get more information and feedback from our customers from actual transactional data. And then the final one is focus groups and empathy interviews. And again, the empathy interviews came out of the customer experience initiative, and it's similar to a focus group, but it's a little less formal and maybe one-on-one with our customers, where again, we have a product or service concept, an interaction, really wanting to understand and empathize with the customer about where they stand, like in an outage situation, what information they're looking for, the things they're considering. As we say, this is the process we're thinking about doing. It gives them an opportunity to provide us some really qualitative data about what the plans that we're offering. So an example that where we used that this year, or in this past 12-month period, was for our income qualified program. We would provide an energy kit, and that had a lot of stuff in it. And so we used an empathy interview process to pull folks in that qualified for that program and better understand what was in the kit that they actually used. So it provides them more value, and it was more cost effective for us to listen to our customers directly and to alter what we provided in those kits. So when it comes to measuring our customer satisfaction, as I mentioned, we focus on the syndicated studies so that we can do that benchmarking and understand by looking at what other utilities are doing well, how we can improve scores in that area. And so J.D. Power, as I said, is for our residential study. Business, we switched to MSI. So J.D. Power is done in 4 waves. So you'll typically get an update throughout the year about how we're doing on a wave, but that's an individual quarter. And then in July, it was just announced what the annual was for the 17-18 study period. And so we're going to be going over that. And then with MSI does it on a calendar year basis for the business customers. So we're excited to have that data on more of a calendar year data. And again, as I mentioned, we're going to have more qualitative and be benchmarked across a large number of utilities there as well. So on our residential customer satisfaction, I mentioned the over 700. So if you look at the bar graph, you can see why 700 was kind of a lackluster goal to have. As OPPD, when we set that as a target, we were below it. You can see we were at 673. And at that point in time, J.D. Power really indicated that was kind of like the gold standard of where utilities were across the industry. Over 700 was a strong utility in terms of overall customer satisfaction. But as you can see, the blue bar there is representative of our Midwest mid-size. The whole industry really has lifted the scores, and now we're well into the 700s. And so that's when we reflected last year and came back with a suggestion that we should go to the top quartile. It's difficult to shoot for number one in your class because sometimes the study provider can change participants and the size, the relative size of the other utilities participating in the study. So we wanted to make sure that we were in that top quartile, which would indicate that we are a strong performer for our size and our region. Across the bottom, we do show what the quartile ranking would have been for those prior years. And you can see for 2018 with the recent results that we just got in July, that we did fall into the first quartile with our score of 740. So we'll be providing more insights to this. Our team is right now working on what we call moving the needle and really doing a deep dive into the tools that J.D. Power provides us. They provide a simulation tool where we're able to go in and better understand which score or which items are really going to have the greatest impact on our customer satisfaction. And so the team, like I mentioned, the public affairs team and the customer service team are working on that analysis, and we'll be providing you more information on that. On the business side, in the past we have relied upon J.D. Power. However, a concern was that we didn't have a statistically valid sample within those. We've always scored really high. In fact, lots of times we would be number one across our segment, and we still are scoring very strong. You can see for 2018, our score is at 783. We don't have a comparison for the 2018 because we didn't participate in J.D. Power, so we don't know what the Midwest mid-size value is, or we're not able to publish it. And then secondly, by the time we started the MSI survey, we didn't have enough sampling size in it, but we will by the end of the year to have a good sample size to report on our business customers. But again, every indication thus far is that we're still performing very strong in the business category. Uh-huh.
We take bragging rights for our increasing our numbers. How about industry-wide? Well, why do you think that was going up in J.D. Power? Why was the industry levels going up? Is there something with the validity of the study?
So I think
is
that
it industry-wide confidence by people, or?
I think there's probably a little bit of confidence. So part of it can be based on what's going on in the economy, so that can affect it. But I think one thing that I noted when we got the top line scores was that the price value isn't as high. So when J.D. Power surveys the customers, they ask them what's the most important attribute to them, and it compares reliability, pricing, community involvement like corporate citizenship, billing and payment, customer service, but that's really only if they've had an interaction within X number of months. And then there's something else in there I know I've forgotten, but yeah.
It's 28%. Billing and payment moved up where price used to be, and so that's at 19%. Price came in third now. Corporate citizenship, communications, and then customer service was only 5% of it.
So, sorry, these percentages are
Waiting.
Mm-hmm.
weighting? Okay.
Right. So, and that's all determined through the J.D. Power survey process. And then again, it's what the customers are saying the value or what's most important to them.
All right.
So what could be driving it on the reliability side is there have been a lot of hurricanes on the East Coast, so that could be driving it up across the country. And I think just customers' dependence on this digital lifestyle is, when you're without power, your life shuts down now. It's not just the lights are out. And so I think that that's having an impact and really placing more importance on the reliability portion of the customer satisfaction score.
Well, that's our speculation, right?
That is a speculation.
Yeah. And that's okay. I mean, 75% of the U.S. population is within 100 miles of the coast. So.
Is what?
Is within 100 miles of the coast, so.
Yeah,
could be.
I would also say on the investor-owned utilities that are part of this, there's been increased pressure from the public utility commissions to tie rate increases to customer satisfaction and reliability numbers. And so I think those that have been performing lower are really working to improve that.
Right.
So that's been, on the investor-owned side, kind of a really critical element in their rate case process, so.
And so that's what, 20-some states have the public?
Well, almost all states have a public utility commission that have investor-owned utilities in them, I would say.
Okay.
So.
I think we've been talking about like outage situations, so.
Hey, Michael, can you come up here so people can hear you? Sorry.
Just to address, sometimes it's not necessarily if you experience an outage, it's how the utility reacts to it. So restoring your power quickly, communicating with you, those things are all important for power quality and reliability, and that's the top factor that drives satisfaction. So you've got that communication aspect within power quality and reliability. So if you look at on the J.D. Power results, if you look at the leaders, those are companies that are really doing well, and as well OPPD is too, doing well at power quality and reliability. That's the strongest driver. But then as Lisa mentioned and Julie mentioned, there's also the billing and payment aspect, the price aspect, communications, corporate citizenship, and then customer service. So the leaders, the reason that the industry is going up is because utilities are just getting better at doing what they're supposed to be doing to be at the top.
Thank you.
Sorry for the
No,
interruption.
thank you, Michael. That's why.
That breakdown was for J.D. Power residential, right? Do we have any sense
Correct.
of what the commercial breakdown is, or is there any?
Not yet, we're working on it with MSI, Market
Okay.
Strategy.
Great.
Okay, so prioritizing the use of the voice of the customer. How we're doing this are some examples of where we have used customer feedback to help us understand what our roadmap needs to look like for our customer-related initiatives. Have been with the Integrated Energy Marketplace, where you would have seen the results of that, where we looked at, what customers feedback was regarding the commercial and industrial products and services that we provide today. We did focus groups on electric vehicle and other survey tools. We've used it in the community solar process. We had our smaller stakeholder feedback, but we also did a broader research, both quantitative and qualitative, to get feedback from customers. And that's an example where the customers' demand, when we did that quantitative study, was pretty clear that they were very interested in a community solar. So that became a priority to develop in 2017. Our customer journey data, so Michael mentioned the communication that goes on during outages, and really that is what's lifting a lot of other utility scores up. And that's an area where we know we have room for improvement, and so that's a focus for my team and really the broader organization. Lisa's team plays a big part in that, obviously. And so we're working on different ways to get some targeted outage information better suited to neighborhoods and that type of thing out to customers, as well as potentially getting some more customized type messages to customers. In the area of interacting respectfully with our customers, obviously this is based on our OPPD core values, that passion to serve, honoring the community, and caring for one another. And so as we're interacting with customers, particularly in the call center, we can have a lot of customers who are struggling to pay their bills. And so it's really important that we are treating them in a dignified manner and being respectful when we handle those types of calls. And so some ways that we monitor for that, obviously we have our transaction surveys, but we also do internal quality assurance. So we record and randomly select different calls from reps, and they get feedback periodically on their performance relative to how we felt the call went from a quality perspective and whether they met this directive of interacting respectfully with our customers. Additionally, we provide customer service training for those folks. And a newer thing that came out of our strategic initiatives last year is our customer personas. And so that's a tool that Jennifer Johnston and Tim O'Brien, whom you're both familiar with, kind of married up to lead this initiative from the Integrated Energy Marketplace perspective and then the customer experience team. And so those personas were developed to better understand within the residential class, within the business class, the different types of lifestyles, demographics, bills, things that are important to those customers, so that we could better empathize when we're building things for those different customer subsets. And so we've used that tool in making some business decisions on whether we pass fees along to customers in certain situations. And so that tool has really helped us to get into, I'll say, the mind of the customer and the situation that customers are in, and make a better, more informed business decision. With regard to treating our customers with fairness, it's important when things don't go, or when a service interaction gets off track, that they have a means to escalate that. And so we provide for that in several ways. We have in our contact center an account supervisor who is essentially a lead call center representative. They've got a great deal of experience across the customer service spectrum, and they're able to take those escalated calls, and typically they're resolving those calls. We have very few calls that escalate above that. If they do, then it goes through an employee supervisor and then to the manager of the call center. Occasionally, we do get some escalations that come through our OPPD.com and the board contacts, or to the senior management contacts. We had several hundred of those, a couple hundred of those, I think, in the past 12 months. And so, again, those are learning opportunities for our team. When some of them are very simple things. If they had asked to escalate it in the call center, it would have likely gotten resolved right away. Others are more complicated processes, and so in those situations, we look at that from a process perspective. Is it technology or system issue that created the issue for the customer? Or was it a human performance in how we interacted with the customer? We didn't follow a process that created that situation. But we work to get those resolved quickly with the customers when they do occur, and then provide feedback to the board members on what has happened in that situation. And then the final note here is just to acknowledge that we do provide a process, a dispute process based on state statutes. That information is printed on the back of the disconnect notice that customers receive that indicates that they can dispute the amount, and that we'll have a conference with them to discuss how they felt they were treated unfairly. Typically, I would say we haven't had anyone for years request that conference. We have interactions certainly over the phone, and things get escalated to leads, but I would say this formal process has not been pursued in many, many years. And then finally, with regard to our updates on trends, so I mentioned the strategic initiatives with customer experience and integrated energy marketplace. We've also provided updates about how we're performing with our credit and collections activities, and particularly the disconnections for non-payment. And there's a variety of other trends that we've provided through board updates as well. So with that, I will open it up for questions. We moved to the recommendation in talking with the Public Information Committee. They didn't indicate that there were any revisions to be made, and they believe that we are in compliance, so it's coming to the board for board action on Thursday. Are there additional questions on customer satisfaction?
No, my experience, I think all the board members probably have the same thing. Customers come to them on occasion, and when I've turned them over to Julie, the response has been great. And I know that you're working for continual improvement, and I think in the short time I've been here, I've seen progress, so kudos to you and your team.
Thank you. All right. Well, again, I do want to thank One, the board for setting the directive, because it does help with our prioritization internally of what's important to our customers. And then secondly, again, to all the employees that support our overall customer satisfaction. You saw the engagement scores earlier. That engagement is a big part in our employees delivering on our strategic directives and living out our core values every day. So I really appreciate the work that they do. Thank you.
As Julie said, that'll be on our Thursday agenda. That we also have SD7, the Environmental Stewardship Monitoring Report. I think Mary's got a presentation on that.
Let's see if we're going to get there. Good morning. It's a pleasure to represent OPPD and give the board a snapshot of the items that we do in order to meet this strategic directive. As Julie said early on, I want to make sure that we give credit to the entire OPPD population. This is an SD that touches everyone within OPPD, and we have a strong team, we have a strong commitment to this, and hopefully I'll be able to demonstrate that to you as we proceed through this. So SD7 has 6 different components that the board has given us as meeting the environmental stewardship. The board has told us that we are committed to operate in an environmentally sensitive way, and these 6 bullets detail out how we're going to do that. I'll go through each one of these individually and show you how we're meeting those requirements. So in terms of the first bullet that comes under environmental stewardship, and that is the board establishes a long-term goal of 30% of retail energy sales shall be supplied from renewable energy resources. In 2017, we achieved that goal of 33.5%, and they were supplied by renewable generation sources, including our wind, hydro, and landfill gas. As we move into 2018, we project by the end of 2018 that we'll be in generally the same area, about 33 to 34%. It's difficult for us to project how much the wind is going to blow in the last 4 months of the year, but we do believe that we'll be about in the same area that we were at the end of 2017. The other thing I might mention here is that this one is difficult to retain at that level. What we're seeing is load growth across the OPPD, and as that load grows and we stay with the same generation resources, you'll see that percentage go down. So to say that we're going to be at the same level of retail sales, 34% of our renewable generation supplying our retail sales load in 2018 is quite an accomplishment. To that end, I thought I would show you the different facilities that we have associated with our wind. We have 9 different wind facilities that we have purchase power arrangements with, most of these in the northeast region of Nebraska. We do also have our Elk City landfill where we recover methane gas at the landfill. And then we have a contract with WAPA to bring in hydro on a seasonal basis. All of these contribute to our 34% of retail sales goal. Moving to the next item. OPPD shall at the pace of value or in response to actual or anticipated regulatory requirements incorporate renewable generation into its generation portfolio. As you know, earlier this year we announced that we are going to build a 5 megawatt community solar project. It's a 20-year purchase power arrangement. It's located just east of the city of Fort Calhoun. There's a picture of where it's located. And the facility is guaranteed to be in commercial operations by contract on June 30th, before June 30th, 2019. And the next item, OPPD shall conduct its business in a manner that meets all environmental regulatory standards and enhances national natural resource conservation and stewardship. This is one that, as we go into this topic, I'll spend a bit more time here in some of the detail. We have the employees of the district, whether it be power plants, transmission distribution facilities, environmental or regulatory affairs, do an outstanding job of performing and monitoring and reporting our operations as necessary. We are in compliance with all environmental regulations, and the result is 0 enforcement actions and 0 fines. We're also in the second year of a 4-year program to monitor and study the fish population in the Missouri River in compliance with EPA Protection Rule 316B. For the 17th consecutive year, OPPD has received an award from Treeline USA. Treeline is a program that exists to recognize the best practices in public and private utility arboriculture, demonstrating how trees and utilities can coexist for the benefit of the community and their citizens, as this is listed on their website as their purpose. So it's really an honor to receive this for 17 years in a row. And we've also begun detention features for to control stormwater runoff at our OPPD properties, and we are establishing pollinator habitats. And I'll go into that a bit more as well. These pollinator habitats are in partner with Nebraska Save the Monarch Foundation to provide more habitats for the monarch butterfly as they migrate through Nebraska. These new habitats have been established at Nebraska City, Fort Calhoun, Sarpy County, and the OPPD Arboretum. There's over 250 acres that have been identified as potential pollinator habitats across OPPD. And the potential, over 100 acres have already been established. OPPD shall conduct its business in a manner that meets all environmental regulatory standards and enhances natural resource conservation and stewardship. Here you see what the fleet emission intensity factors are, both for carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and nitrogen oxide. As you can see in 2017, there's an uptick in that intensity factor. That's really due to less generation coming from Fort Calhoun. So it's not that we are putting any more emissions into the environment. What it really is that we're producing less megawatt hours, which is the denominator of this calculation. I'll also note that half of NC2 is included in the emissions as well as in the production, since the other half goes to our partners at NC2.
And Mary, in that regard, if the board remembers when we made the decision on Fort Calhoun, our decision was only to replace about 40% of the Fort Calhoun output in either contracts or in other manners. And so we've done that obviously through some renewable projects. We've done that through some other contract projects. So that kind of explains that piece. We only replaced so many of those megawatt hours. And so we've reduced the denominator, at least Fort Calhoun's denominator, by about 60%, and so that reduces the overall denominator. So to Mary's point.
So as a result, the intensity goes up,
Right,
but the level of emissions on a tonnage basis or pounds basis did not go up.
When we purchase, I assume that generating source gets rolled in because we take ownership of that purchase. Is that right? Is that factored in?
In most of the purchases that we've purchased outside has been in capacity, but Mary, go ahead.
Yeah, most of our purchases are purchase power arrangements.
Right.
So most of those are wind in
Right.
actuality. So, and we don't take ownership of those. We just buy the power from the developers.
But so in other words, if we're purchasing anything on the wholesale market on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, that's not accounted for in here?
I think it's accounted for if it's our generation.
Okay.
If we're actually producing the power and putting it into the wholesale market, then it's accounted for.
Okay.
If we're actually purchasing and bringing that in, I would say no, it's not being accounted for because we don't know the source. It could be
Right.
from wind, it could be
Okay.
from solar. We don't know where that's coming from.
Okay.
Just the observation that as you were explaining the uptick here, it is important, in my view, to see both of those numbers, both the number of total emissions as well as the intensity, so that we understand that.
Thank you for that.
Just curious, how far back do we have emissions factors numbers?
Oh,
So we're back through 2015. I don't remember when we started reporting
Do you have
those.
emission numbers? I think I've seen them back.
We started calculating in 2013.
13? Okay.
From that, and, yeah, so we
Okay.
can go back 5 years at least.
Okay.
Thank you, Russ. Continuing on with that bullet, I do also want to bring to your attention that at the North Omaha station, air emission reductions from 2016, 2017 have gone down by 11.3% in sulfur dioxide, 4.7% in nitrogen oxide, and 4.9% in carbon dioxide. Also want to report to the board that Nebraska City Unit 2 has achieved what's called low emitter electric generating status. And what that means is over the last 12 quarters, we have successfully been well below the regulatory requirements for the emissions of to meet the MATS requirements as well as particulate requirements on a quarterly basis. That 12 consecutive quarters is important because over the last 3 years, we've been below, I believe it's 50% on MATS and 20%, is that right? 20% of particulate?
Each of them are at 50%,
50%,
50% below what the limit is.
What the limit is. So that's demonstrated here. Nebraska City 1 has completed 8 successful quarters, is what it says here, but I will tell you last week we completed 10 successful quarters. We are hopeful that at the fourth quarter of 2018 and first quarter of 2019, we will complete the 12 consecutive quarters and also have NC1 at the low emitting status. North Omaha is also in this program. We are conducting quarterly reviews of North Omaha. That station is at different places depending on the unit, but you should know that we are attempting to achieve that at all of our coal facilities.
What's HCI stand for? Sorry, I couldn't track that down on the.
I'm sorry?
HCI?
HDI?
HCl.
Hydrochloric acid, I think it's HCl,
Thank you.
yeah. Did we have
All
that
right.
in there wrong?
I just didn't see the footnote denoting what it stood for.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. OPPD shall conduct its business that meets, in a manner that meets all regulatory standards and enhances natural resources. Continuing on in that, we do recycle almost all of our fly ash. As you see here in at North Omaha Station, it's been 100% recycled. At the Nebraska City Unit 1 station, it's at 52%. That's lagging behind this year. We're typically higher than that. Our understanding is that there hasn't been the marketplace there because of some of the early rains that we had in the springtime, and construction projects are behind schedule. So we're hoping as we get into the later months of this year that that will pick up.
What was it primarily used for? Making
Concrete. Yes. And then also our bottom ash, the market for bottom ash is getting more and more difficult, and so you see very low percentages there. We continue to look for markets for that with our contractor who we work with as far as recycling our ash.
Mary, why is NC2 at 0?
NC2 is at 0 because we have a full back end on that, and as we use the line contaminates the fly ash to where it's unmarketable.
Okay, okay.
And so it gets landfilled.
Okay. That makes sense.
Continuing on, meeting our environmental regulatory standards and resource and conservation and stewardship, we do have a number of partnerships, or excuse me, we do go out and we recycle a number of things. This is where it crosses everybody in OPPD. We recycle batteries, we scrap metal, we recycle used oil, we remove our PCB out of our transformers, we recycle wood poles out of our energy delivery area. We do a lot of things across the fleet and across all of our facilities to ensure that we are doing the best we can to conserve our natural resources. OPPD shall participate and provide leadership in the development of national, state, regional environmental policies and initiatives that support OPPD's mission. We do a number of things with a number of different entities.
APPP, or American Public Power Association, Large Power Public Council, American Wind. We participate in the Wind and Solar Conference coming soon to Nebraska in the fall. We're involved with Treeline USA, as we spoke about earlier. We are also involved in a regional area with the city of Omaha. Elk City, as you saw, that we have the unit up there. So we have a number of different memberships and levels of participation in each one of these areas that support the development of our national, state, and regional environmental policies. OPPD shall promote efficient use of energy as a company and by its customer owners. I believe Tim Burke went through this in his presidential report last month, but I'll go through it again. We do have a program, it's our AC unit control program called Cool Smart. Cool Smart on a hot summer day when we are expecting peak demand. We can call on those people that are included in this program to control their air conditioner. It'd be 15 minutes on, 15 minutes off. They can call. We'll put a free device on their air conditioning unit. As we put that device on, they receive a bill credit of $30 and then $20 for every year after that they participate. Those 15 minutes on, 15 minutes off typically operate between the hours of 3 and 7, and there's a maximum of 12 of those. If you look at this graph, the orange line that you see is what our load and our demand would have been had we not used our Cool Smart program to shave our peak. The blue line is what it is with the yellow line is what it is with Nest, and then the blue line is with Nest and Cool Smart in effect. Our Nest program is our smart thermostat program. It provides about 4 megawatts, as you can see on here. It's a one-time bill credit of $100 once you sign up, and then $20 annually after that. You have to be part of the Rush Hour Rewards program, and there may be up to 15 times a year between May and October where we would call on the Nest folks to allow us to control their thermostat.
Between Nest and would we put a figure on what percent we're seeing our peak demand?
It's about
2-3%
66
maybe?
megawatts is what was shown here. So in general, you get about 62 megawatts from the Cool Smart program and about 4 megawatts currently from Nest.
So percentage-wise, that would be roughly, I realize it's difficult to pin.
3%.
Well, 3,
something like that.
Nest is
still significant.
relatively new, right? We're 9 months into it, basically.
But basically, it allows us to not have to have a reciprocating unit, for example, or in this case, almost 4 of those,
Or to buy
by
different
having
power.
a tool like these that reduces peak on those hot days of the year, which is significant.
Is that Cool Smart, the goals you set out? How long have you been doing that?
It is shy of where we expected it to be. I would say it's fairly consistent with the market research, but it's not as high as we would like it to go. But now that we have the thermostat, that program, I'll say from our end, is a little bit cleaner implementation-wise. We don't have to send somebody to the location to install the device. So we're hopeful that one will kind of take off where other people maybe have been reluctant on the air conditioning side to put that device on their air conditioning.
You just gotta keep searching for new ways to
Market,
find
yep.
whatever works for that person.
And actually, we've been doing market research on just that to find out, does the incentive need to be different? And what do you do with the customers that are already on it? So, more to come.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that we have new customers to the district. And they obviously contact us initially
Right.
to be a customer. I'm assuming that they are probably approached basically one-on-one to see if they're interested.
Right, that's one of the things that the team downstairs does work on and monitor for. And we have promotion periods, and the call center is incentive to get people to sign up for programs.
Does that, I guess you'd call it a one-on-one thing, is that more effective, I suppose, than the main ones? I mean, obviously initially we had the initial spike in interest, and obviously it was going to decline a little bit after the initial rush
Right.
of new enrollees, but the new customers in the district, are we getting a positive?
We have seen a positive, when we've offered those types of things at sign up, we have seen positive. And we're gonna continue to focus on that with the customer experience initiative. That's an area where we can make tweaks just procedurally and how the reps are handling things without any new technology in place, and it'll improve the customer experience. So we are pursuing that.
Okay.
We do have fairly good direct mail responses when we do direct mail. Our vendors, our third parties that provide some of our services have often commented that we have a really good response rate. And I think it goes back to the trusted brand that OPPD is offering something that, you know, like our in-home line protection, that type of program to our customers. They trust that we'll make sure that it's a good program for them.
When we first rolled out the Nest program, we identified that vendor through a selection process.
Correct.
And I think you noted that you were going to sort of continually evaluate whether or not there are other alternatives out there for doing the same, other vendors, other smart thermostats. Is that sort of an ongoing process?
So I would say what we decided we were gonna do was wait, let's get through one cooling season
Okay.
and then do some surveying, get some feedback and really understand the value of the thermostat program. There was a huge price differential in the responses, and that's why we went with Nest.
Okay.
But Nest provided the best economic value for us
Sure.
to pursue. And I think they had more customers that were already on Nest thermostats in our demographic.
Okay.
So, and they do provide, Nest does provide a lot of marketing as well for us, in addition to the marketing that we do.
Okay.
This is the DSN portfolio status. As you can see, in 2017, we had a cumulative total of 134 megawatts. We are looking at the plan in 2018, expecting to get somewhere around 202. And again, this is the programs that we have in place. And we're hoping that the projection for 2018, we're hoping to get there. I will say that the HVAC Smart and the certified home performance homes, as of July 31st, we've processed 250 HVAC and 100 certified performance homes rebates for cumulative savings of about 9 megawatts. So that's also adding to this. And we have about $1.5 million budgeted for the business custom and prescriptive portfolio. The electrical vehicle program, which you heard about earlier this year, it is part of a process and education incentives for our employees and our customers to purchase an EV and a charging station. OPPD will distribute 2 levels of rebates, $4,500 rebates towards the purchase of both an EV as well as a ChargePoint home charging station, or $500 for the rebates who purchase a ChargePoint home charging station. In terms of ongoing education, we've also have a commitment with Nissan dealerships for $3,000 incentive towards the purchase of a new Nissan Leaf, and up to $7,500 of federal income tax credit, depending on the manufacturers available to our customer owners. In terms of what OPPD does in its fleet, we currently have 2 all-electric Nissan Leafs EVs. We have 4 plug-in hybrids. We have 39 standard hybrids, 3 bucket trucks that are equipped with battery-operated booms, and 4 EV chargers. And the plan is to put a mid-range level 2 charger for public use outside of this building here at Energy Plaza.
Mayor, can I just add that Dr. Corbin just received his leaf, so he's going to help us through that customer experience.
Oh, great. Great. And speaking of that customer experience, OPPD shall proactively engage in customer owners and other stakeholders in meeting this directive. We do a lot of outreach, as you've heard from several of my peers here today. They are actively involved in all of this across, but no one more so than Lisa Olson and her group. She does a tremendous job in a stakeholder process.
We engage our stakeholders on SD13 through SD13 stakeholder engagement on things like Emerald Ash Borer, work with forestry, Earth Day at Elmwood Park, Arbor Day at Lawrence Gardens, electric vehicles, community solar, Sarpy County outreach. We've done that. Ceresco, I think you're all familiar with. Small House on the Prairie and the pollinator habitat at the Arboretum, just to name a few. So with that, the Public Information Committee has reviewed and accepted the monitoring report for SD7 and recommends that the board and OPPD find that OPPD be sufficiently in compliance with this policy.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to change, right? So we don't really need to worry too much about that discussion now. I just got a couple clarification questions.
Yeah. I will say that, the last slide here is the Public Information Committee is currently reviewing and refining SD7, and the plan is to bring a draft policy back to the board on September 11th.
Yep. So just like I said, clarification questions. So on slide 13, we've got a list of some of the things that are recycled, and can you further explain what the 20% diversion rate is and what the 25% target is and includes?
Yeah, this is the percentage that we are attempting to work with Papillion Sanitation on, a diversion rate of 25%, meaning the percentage of waste that's diverted from general trash collection over to a recycled facility.
Okay.
So that's what the diversion rate is. Correct me if I'm wrong, Russ, today.
That's correct.
Thank you.
You're at 20 today and the target is 25?
Correct.
Is that right? Okay.
On the same slide?
Yeah, please.
The recycling the poles, what happens there? The wooden poles? You chip them up, or are they?
Oh, you mean where do they go?
Where are they recycled into?
Yeah.
I'm not sure I know that. Mo?
Do you know,
Yeah,
Russ?
I'm not sure, we have to check maybe with Tim McBeebe.
Is it possible, this is, I mean, not to be too geeky on this, is it possible that they're reused? That there's a secondary use for the poles?
There could be, Rick, and I think at some of the locations they do, we have like an indemnification signature that they can fill out and take polls, and we've offered those out to folks that would use them, but I do think some of them are actually recycled too, and I just don't remember the name of the company that those go to, so it kind of works both ways.
Something important to note here is that there's a liability component there. We used to, right? We used to share those poles, but some of those are too damaged to the point that it could cause a liability for us to market those as poles. So there's a variety of ways to recycle that. We can get you more information. My supply chain team through investment recovery, we can get you
I'll follow
more
up
precise.
as a reminder. Thank you.
And the cost avoidance here is what we would have to pay to dispose of those, so
Sure.
we're really avoiding the cost of disposal.
That's great.
Do the wood poles have a metal support? It's solid wood.
No, it's just wood.
Now, they may have
band.
metal pieces
Attachments.
or attachments depending on, who may be using them and what they're used for. And that's the piece that we indemnify, as well as the creosote piece that those wood poles are embraced in early in their life, and then the way they're preserved. And so we want to make sure that whoever uses those in an appropriate way and indemnifies OPPD in that.
Hey, Craig, on your question, you said that, so just to make sure, so it's currently refining this SD7, but like I asked earlier, to keep these things kind of going, we are still going to approve this one. So where we're at today, and then we're refining it, going to take your input, have a discussion next month, and probably ongoing, whatever.
Thank you for the reminder.
Just,
appreciate it.
But we do want to approve this month.
But did you have another question, Craig?
Yes, I've got a couple more. The DSM portfolio status slide, it actually changed from the version that you sent us out earlier. We just talked about 2018 plan. Are we still on track for 2023, which is when we get that 300 megawatt cumulative target?
So,
right?
if you, on that slide, you can see that where we're at is probably a third of where we said we needed to be.
Yep.
Based on the 2018 plan. And so we're just now embarking on a DSM potential study to update
Okay.
that study data that we did
Okay.
back in 2013 when that 300 megawatt was established.
Yep.
So that we can better understand what programs will be more successful, or, are there new things we should be offering?
Okay.
So that process, we think that we'll have the results to report in like the spring of 2019.
So is that different than, I think you had mentioned at the last board meeting, some further analysis of our energy efficiency programs?
That's what
It would
it
be
is.
It's the same thing?
Right, so that plan, that study would then help inform Heather and her team on which products and services or DSM programs to pursue.
Okay. And the energy efficiency is rolled into that
Right.
analysis?
And,
Okay.
and a big part of that is surveying our customers to understand what they're doing today and what they would be interested in partaking in the future.
Okay. Okay, that's helpful. And then I think my last question, again, just trying to make sure I understand, to what extent do we incorporate any of these factors into purchasing? Whether it's poles or, we purchase all sorts of stuff, right? To what extent are we sort of driving down into the supply chain? Any considerations related to sustainability, environmentalism? How does that factor in?
So I would say a couple of things, and then maybe Javier can help me out here. I know in terms of all of the recycling that we do and repurposing of items, there's a whole area within supply chain that is just focused on that. And so we have people that specialize in salvaging and recycling. So from one perspective on the back end, they're doing that. On the front end, when we put out specifications, we're obviously looking at what is the life cycle cost, what does that look like in terms of disposal going forward. So as we are evaluating different projects and putting them in place, we're taking all of that into account. So for instance, if there is a wood pole that has a longer life, so we wouldn't have to replace it as frequently or as often, then that means less that we have to buy, less that we have to recycle in the end. So those are the sorts of things that we look at. And Javier, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, or those would be the things that I would.
From a supply chain management perspective, I don't think we are doing anything officially. We don't have specific parameters that say we will give preference to vendors that demonstrate these type of environmental stewardship. We're not at that point yet. We are actually right now working with certain vendors and establishing parameters around safety, where we are awarding certain contracts to vendors who have demonstrated safety standards. And in a similar manner, we could potentially incorporate that into the future. And I think this is something that would be guided to us as we try to meet lower rates, high reliability, high environmental stewardship. This is something that we could potentially look at how do we balance those variables as we make those decisions. But today, we don't have an official program.
Is it fair to follow up and say that you do a little bit of a life cycle analysis? First cost, operating costs, that's happening.
We do a total operating cost, yes.
Yeah.
Total life cycle.
Thank you.
Right.
Yes.
I would add another example of where we have done, this is on our bill paper and envelopes. We do, I think it's the SFI, Sustainable
Forward Stewardship
Forestry.
Council,
Yeah, so we shifted to that, probably 8 or 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So ideally, people would sign up for paperless and
Right,
not
right.
print it. That would be our first choice, but.
Something like paper bills.
And you've calculated the savings on that too, right?
Right.
Yeah.
On paperless.
On paperless,
paperless.
yeah.
FSC, okay.
Your statement's now made from recycled poles.
Sorry?
Your
Adams.
statement's now made from recycled wood poles.
They might be a little sticky.
There's a stain on your finger.
Watch out for splinters.
I want to make one clarification. Scott was telling me that as I went through this on the DSM portfolio, I said it was projected for 2018. It's really planned. It's what we have planned for 2018. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you very much.
Oh, wait, I had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So an earlier slide was mentioned that you're planning to do stormwater runoff activities, but haven't you been doing stormwater management plans for a while?
This was detention of stormwater as opposed to just a stormwater plan.
I'm sorry, again?
We're actually putting in a detention program for stormwater as
Gotcha.
opposed to just stormwater management. So it's another step forward in terms of managing our stormwater.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Is system management.
I wouldn't wander too far, Mary. Oh, well, you don't have to stand up for it, yeah. So the System Management Subcommittee met on August 7th, and we'll dive into two elements there. Frankly, I need some help. Well, before I ask for the help, we did briefly touch on, and to Director Gay's point, SD9, three of the directors had submitted comments. There's going to be some meetings late this month, early next month, prior to other discussion and action on that. And then where I need the help is the conversation on the transmission line easement acquisition. Help me with what we talked about at that point. Yeah.
We're gonna bring that next month
Oh, okay. So,
with the stakeholder feedback.
no wonder. Okay. With that, we did have some good discussion, and thank you, Director Trinan, for your questions, especially.
Just a timing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's fine, thank you. On the Nebraska City Station 1 turbine outage, would you go ahead?
Thank you, Director Yoder. Yes, this is a request for the board to authorize us to negotiate and award a contract for procurement services to replace turbine parts as part of our spring outage for Unit 1, Nebraska City Unit 1. We would like to head down this path as opposed to the sealed bid process. Because of the complexity of our turbine generators, the complexity of that, as well as the importance, we want to make sure that it's technically feasible to, not feasible, it's technically correct to put in the parts that we want to. We also want to have discussions with contractors regarding contract terms, specifically around technical requirements, key warranty and performance guarantees, and other risk mitigation factors. So that's why we're asking the board to proceed with an award and negotiate an award as opposed to a sealed bid process for these turbine parts.
Right, and I think the sense of the committee was, that sealed bid is a preference, but we certainly understand the need to do it this way, and thank you for that report. Other questions, anyone? Mo then gave us a good update on the fiber optic ground wire installations, and if you would do so again for everybody, that'd be great.
Sure. This board action item is for the construction labor for the fiber optic ground wire. And if you remember, we discussed that a couple times before, that it's a 4-year project to upgrade the communication circuits that we need for reliability and monitoring the system. And right now, we have a big portion of our system that use the leased telephone lines from local communication providers, that those will be obsolete by 2020. So we're proactively planning on having those communication circuits replaced. And we start in 2018. And then we have a big portion in 19 and 20. So this action is, as I said, for the construction labor for about 16 of those circuits. And we'll start, if the board approves this, we'll start sometime in September and complete that part by the end of the year. And then we're going to come back to the board for many more items, including additional circuits, including wires, including fiber cabinets. So this will be a long process in the next few years. Yeah.
Right, so we will happily, or because we're upgrading, we will happily see this activity in the future years. Good, other questions?
I've got a few questions. Sure. Engineer's estimate was $1 million. And the bid ranges were rather substantial. Any sense for why there was such a big difference between?
Yeah,
there's the low one, which is only a portion of the work, but what
Right.
happened with the others?
You know, sometimes we really don't have the specific information why it varies that much, but a few things that we kind of know that depending how busy they are and how experienced they are and whether they have done this before or not, sometimes they're almost, I don't want to say guessing, but, you know, they provide their best estimates and learn from it. So for the vendors that we use and they have a lot of experience doing certain tasks, they're usually more accurate, and others are not. So I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, that's helpful. That's kind of what I figured. But it's a bigger difference that I think I've seen.
Yeah, I mean,
something
it's a
over
large
double.
swing from 1.4 million to almost 4 million.
Yeah.
Was this a local company, or were they local?
Well, yeah, they are
they're
local. They're from Waverly, Nebraska, and we have done work with them multiple times, and they have done a really good job. We're very satisfied with the work they have done for us. So it's really a blessing that they're local and they're the best and lowest bid.
So just to follow on that, I mean, we don't see a lot of change orders that happen on these kinds of projects. So, I mean, sometimes the strategy is to have the low first cost and then work hard to have a lot of change orders.
No, not really. And if you look in the fact sheet, item E, you know, we can adjust that up and down depending how much work they get done, but
Very
it should
good.
be pretty close to the number that we have. Yeah.
Thank you.
And we basically are gonna pay them every month they complete certain tasks, we pay them. So we monitor that very closely, and it'll be pretty close to that number.
And, yeah, we got good history with it. Thank you.
Sure.
Couple more?
Yes, please.
I noticed that there were 4 bidders that didn't complete the KPI, but submitted it. I'm just kind of curious as to if that was something that we did on our end to, you know what I mean? So,
No, I don't.
at 4 occasions, the proposal did not include an express acknowledgement of the key performance indicators, although the applicable pages were included in this proposal. It sounds like for Watts, we went back because that was the one we wanted. I'm just curious, through our RFP process, we asked them to submit something. In 4 cases, they didn't.
Right.
Which kind of
Right.
stuck out to me. I didn't know what happened or if there was a
Yeah,
totally on their end.
Yeah, typically, I mean, we evaluate the whole process. We've got the technical evaluation, then we have the legal evaluation, and then we decide if they're legally responsive or not, or they're technically responsive or not. So sometimes, even when they provide all the information, we go back and go through the process and figure out, you know, whether we have what we need or we need to ask for more information. And Steve, please
You described it
jump
very
in.
well.
Yeah.
And this is somewhat speculative, but it's possible that this group of contractors is not as used to preparing the KPIs as some groups of contractors. That is a relatively new process that we've been utilizing.
Okay.
So it's supply chain
Yeah.
and conjecture, because, you know, we're raising the bar, and that's what
Right.
you're seeing this year.
Okay.
They're not there yet, and they'll catch on
Yeah.
pretty quickly.
Some of them appeared to have attached them, which I think they meant that they're including them, but I think we were looking for an affirmative statement.
That's correct.
Okay,
Fill them out.
that we want them.
Okay.
So,
Right.
yep.
All right. And then, sorry, last question. And maybe this is completely common and we do it every time, but this is maybe the first time that I've caught it. The memo from Troy, the last sentence, the bond of the successful bidder must also be approved by the board. And I don't know should we as a board see those bonds? I mean, we're approving them. I don't know if this is just a completely.
You certainly can. The bond form is
really
a common form
straightforward?
that does not change at all from contract to
Okay.
contract. And the reason for that requirement, it's a requirement of state law that for a project involving public infrastructure, that there needs to be a bond in place, because of course you can't put a construction lien on a public project.
Right.
And Troy Meyerson and I we don't always do it, but we try to include that sentence in there so that we all remember to ask the board to approve that bond, because that too is a requirement.
All right.
So that's the science, if there is one, behind that.
Okay.
Any more
I'm good.
questions?
Any other questions?
Well, Steve, I'm grateful you're here, because I can answer.
I got one on this key performance indicators. What do you say, we're upping our game? What, it's just, I haven't heard of that much, I guess. What is
We're
it?
asking our vendors to include and acknowledge key performance indicators as a response to the RFP. And this is something that it's part of good hygiene in supply chain management and sourcing strategies. Not every company requires that, and I think that's one of the reasons why you have vendors who are not used to responding that way. I don't think there's anything that they were trying to hide or not responding. It's just we're changing, we're adding transparency and accountability to vendors and responses, and I think it's part of that change.
And so on this thing, it'd be like you need to have X amount done by this date.
Sure.
What if they don't do that?
Right.
Then what?
And acknowledge that we're requesting for certain key performance indicators to be met as part of the request for proposals,
Is there
and for them to say,
penalties
yes,
involved
we
then if they
acknowledge
don't
and
meet these?
we're ready to deliver.
Is there penalties involved if they don't meet them then?
It depends on which RFP you're talking about, depending on what service.
So in this example, are there penalties if the contractor doesn't meet the key performance indicators in this
I mean,
example?
it's over 3 years, I think it says.
Troy?
Yeah, I didn't think so, but thanks, Troy.
In some cases, we'll actually have very clear demonstrated costs if they don't meet it by a certain date that they would be accountable for. In this case, we just want to, with the time frame that we're required with the local telephone companies, we want them to recognize this project has to be done in this
Keeps them on
time.
task, I get
Correct.
that, but there's no penalty.
And then my guess is if they get way behind, we have the ability to
always
go get the bond to be able to then accentuate
Right, so the
somebody else
penalty is
to
a
be
breach
able
of
to do this
contract,
work.
and then you proceed.
Right.
Yeah, I just, new concept, I haven't seen that.
We are clarifying, you have a lot more specificity on what's expected and what type of performance. Good.
Good questions. Thank you, everybody. Other questions? All right. Thank you very much. These are both going to be on consent agenda.
Okay. We have 2 items for closed session. Tim, did you want to?
I move that the board go into closed session at this time, which is 11:40, to consider the appointment of a corporate officer and to discuss decommissioning planning details at Fort Calhoun Station. With respect to the appointment of a corporate officer, this closed session is necessary to prevent needless injury to reputation, given that the discussion will involve evaluation of the potential officer's job performance, and this individual has not requested a public meeting. With respect to the Fort Calhoun decommissioning, a closed session is necessary to evaluate legal and regulatory matters that are protected by the attorney-client privilege and to evaluate decommissioning planning details that would create a competitive disadvantage to the district if known by potential vendors.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Christie?
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Gay?
Yes.
Moody?
Yes.
Trinan?
Yes.
Yoder?
Yes.
Carried.
Motion passes. This motion to go into closed session is passed. This closed session will be limited to the consideration of the appointment of a corporate officer and the discussion of decommissioning planning details before Calhoun Station. No vote or board action will be taken during the closed session.